Different adapts, different over.
Good morning. Welcome to SG Trader, the live trading channel where you can follow us for free, copy our trades and make some profit. We trade live real money in front of you. If you are looking for our trading strategy, go to www.company.co.uk/trading strategy.
So there seems to be at least what looks like a technical glitch there in terms of the Eurex trade this morning. Let's take a look at the live equity trade as the indexes, cash index is open. Here you can see our global macro movers screen, and on the left side column, you'll see each index pop up as it begins to trade. The FTSE gaining about 0.2% right now. You see the Netherlands gaining also about 0.2%. Euro stocks 50 up 0.25%, and the CAC also up about 0.1%, a little less than 0.1%. So you're not seeing a lot of movement here, but you are seeing up arrows. You're seeing plus signs in front of these numbers, even though the boxes are gray, because as they hover around unchanged, we don't make them green or red. Not till there's any kind of size in these contracts will the GMM screen color them green or red, or if it's an amazing move, if it's 3 standard deviations away from the 90-day Z-score, then you get a black box, which we don't see here. So not a lot of volatility today. European markets then opening pretty tame, despite an incredible quarter for stocks last quarter from Asia to the U.S. Our next guest says that the path of economic recovery is likely to drag now as COVID-19 persists. Joining us is Kurt Custard, Newton Investment Management CIO. Kurt, thanks for coming on the program. The second quarter was amazing. And of course, you know, it doesn't matter if you didn't get in on at the right time. But even year to date, you know, the S&P 500 is only down about 4%, doing a lot better than the European indexes year to date. The FTSE is still down 18%. What do you think we have to look forward to, since today is July 1st, the beginning of Q3 coming up?
Well, I think what you've seen to date has been a pretty understandable rebound from what was a very, very dire situation earlier in the year. I mean, it seems like an eternity ago, but February, when this whole thing kicked off, wasn't very long ago, and you've obviously seen some pretty dramatic price action going forward. I think the pace of that recovery now is going to start to slow. Clearly, you've had outbreaks across the United States, which are resurgent. You know, you have to keep up with the 24-hour news cycle to figure out which lockdowns are taking place where, and I would expect that to persist. And then there's just the simple problem of the math is when you have a very low base for numbers, as we did back in February, as we saw those terrible retail sales when we had the slowdown and the unemployment rates, et cetera. Any improvement on that low base, you know, makes it for an attractive comparison going forward. You know, when I look ahead, I really, to see the level and depth of the economic recovery, I'm focused on what happens after government supports begin to wind down, after companies start to return to some degree of normality in terms of their workflow. And that, to me, is going to be the real trigger for the pace of economic growth going forward.
And Kurt, I wonder, good morning to you, I wonder what that means for investment grade credit then, because we've seen that being supported, in particular in the United States, of course. Do you think that support is pretty much never ending? Do we ever return to a sort of more normal market in that regard? Is there a time horizon you look to for that?
That's a great question. So the short answer is for the foreseeable future, I expect support. You know, the Fed has done a terrific job of supporting the market to date, but what it has done, it's interfered in those markets, right? I mean, it's actively going out and sort of buying credits and CDX, et cetera, to be able to support the IG credit market. Now, as we go forward, I think that support is going to continue to take place, and I think you're going to see Powell and gang continue to support a broad range of monetary policy measures in order to facilitate liquidity in the system till we get through this. Whether we can return to normal is a great question, because the longer you persist this with these sort of QE/unorthodox monetary policies, the more it gets baked into people's psychology. The more it becomes a implicit sort of protection for a given spread level or a given level of market dysfunction. And I think in the long term, if that persists, it's not very healthy.
What do you think can be done? I mean, we see so much fiscal support from most major countries and certainly from all the central banks. Do you think we need to see more in order to keep markets at the current level, or are you concerned that there could be a pullback in that sort of spiking of the punch bowl, so to speak?
Well, I think when you talk about markets, it depends on what region of the world you're talking about. The U.S. market has been driven really by three factors, as far as I can tell. You've had a change in the discount rate, which I would expect to remain low. I don't see the Fed tightening monetary policy anytime soon, and I would expect the yield curve to remain relatively muted, with credit spreads relatively well behaved. The market is clearly looking through sort of the COVID crisis and making an assumption about a return of economic growth, which that's the question that I would, or that's the area of growth I would put the biggest question mark around. I think the SME sector in the United States is getting hit really hard. I don't see those people transitioning immediately to new jobs, and as government support begins to wear out, I would be concerned that you're likely to see a little bit more equity market volatility in the United States. The third factor is probably tech. And tech has been a great strength of the U.S. economy and a great strength of the U.S. stock market. It's been one of Newton's themes for a long time, and I would expect this to continue. Now, it's priced pretty aggressively. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But on a long-term trade, what COVID has done is it's really accelerated this digitalization that was taking place a little bit more gradually prior to this. So whether it's schooling, whether it's medicine, whether it's working from home, we've just had an explosion of the transition to that environment.
Yeah. Yes, we talked about tech quite a lot. I wonder, as we approach the US election then, Kurt, in November, through what lens do you think risk assets should view this? Do you think risk assets are going to be more nervous about higher taxes or further signs of mishandling of the COVID-19 outbreak?
Well, you could get a double whammy, right? So you could get a circumstance where there is a double impact from the influenza virus and the still existing COVID situation, which will obviously add more fragility to the medical system in the United States. And then, with the handling as it's being perceived now in the U.S. not going as well as we would like, my guess is that there is a chance for a change in the administration. If that happens, then there's going to be concern about corporate tax rates, which obviously would be a negative for the S&P. So I think you could have a volatile fourth quarter as both these things come to light.
All right, we do actually have a chart, which we'll try and get up throughout the program at some point, showing the lead Biden has taken. I think it's really interesting in terms of the polls, although I do have producers reminding me that polls often get it wrong, have throughout history. Dewey defeats Truman. Nonetheless, we definitely watch them and report on them as well. Kurt Custard, Newton Investment Management CIO, is going to stick with us. Coming up, road to recovery. We get a raft of PMI data out of Europe this morning. We'll be watching for any signs of moving forward or backwards in these all-important numbers. This is Bloomberg.
Brett Favre, legendary quarterback. Jerry Rice, legendary wide receiver.
You ready for your weekly meeting? Yeah, we're ready.
Let's do this.
Let's stack the deck.
When legends play, they wear Copperfit Advanced Back Pro. Copperfit's best-selling compression back support just got better with new double-band adjustable supports for customizable compression when you need it most.
Since I put this on, I feel so much better. The core is the most important thing. To know that I'm stabilized here. Whatever I'm doing, I can give it 100%.
4 built-in stabilizing supports designed to improve posture and help reduce lower back stress and strain.
You have back pain, and it's affecting your everyday life. Do something. If you can find something to help you get back out and be active like CopperFit, go for it. Absolutely. Do not give up.
A high-performance compression fabric infused with the powerful properties of copper, 360-degree flexible mobility, and lightweight, durable construction.
Nothing more painful than having back pains. If you're aching, if you feel like you can't work out anymore, you can. And that's with CopperFit.
Yeah. It's for all of us who still want to be active, still want to compete.
Way to go. That's what I'm talking about. Man, this really does feel good. It feels to me like the fountain of youth.
CopperFit's best-selling back support just got bigger, badder, and better. Call 1-800-515-1793 or on the web at advancedbackpro.com. Get yours now for only $19.99.
This does feel good.
That's what I've been saying.
You think it was fair?
It was fun.
Play for the love of the game.
CopperFit. Live limitless.
Investors, want cash flow? NRIA is making an accommodation. We are extending higher than normal 10% monthly electronic payouts right now from our real estate-backed Class A Buildings Fund. You'll receive steady 10% monthly payments and total returns targeted with bonus at 18 to 21%. NRIA's 14-year track record and $850 million of new construction income property backs you. Get 10% monthly electronic cash flow right now. Call 201-210-2727.
Welcome back to the European Market Open. A fairly flat, mixed session really here for European equity markets. The Stoxx 600 up by 0.2%. The German market doing quite nicely, but the CAC in Paris underperforming. Of course, we talked to Caroline Conan about that story around Airbus a little bit earlier on today. Now, along with Spain's PMI numbers due shortly, we are expecting data from France, Germany and Italy for an indication of the recovery in Europe. So we'll all be focusing in on that data when it hits. Kurt Custard, Newton Investment Management CIO, is still with us. And Kurt, when you look at your investment strategy for Europe, I wonder how much of a game changer the recovery fund for Europe is going to be in terms of your analysis.
Well, it obviously supports what is a more encouraging situation anyway. I think Europe has done a decent job, although it's still spotty in places of addressing the virus and being able to support the economy fiscally is really critical. So, I think that it's adding to what is a growing positive story within Europe.
What do you think about the rotation into cyclicals? It's so important. I mean, you mentioned tech in terms of the U.S. Here in Europe, we have some obviously heavily weighted cyclical companies and hugely important for the economy as well. I'm sitting obviously in German, Kurt. Volkswagen has, 400,000 employees here, some massive number. What do you think about the support that industry's been given and the equity and debt as an investment in those companies?
I think a little bit it's a function of time horizon. I think certainly on a 12 to 18 month view, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you are going to see a rebound from what has been substantially depressed levels of consumer behavior. As the consumer behavior returns to normal around the world, and you look where Germany exports to, et cetera, that's all good. I mean, you're in an environment now where I think the industrials will see an uptick, both because of government support and because of the return of the consumer. On a 10-year trade, then that's a slightly different story. I mean, I think a lot of these older economy companies have to start to address, their product mix and where they're sourcing their energy, et cetera, to be able to be competitive. But that's a 10-year view. I think on a 12 to 18 month view, it's a very interesting position to be in for them.
I just want to tell our viewers that we're keeping across this Eurex story. We got a notice from Eurex earlier on today saying the system is currently experiencing technical difficulties. The T7 system currently experiencing technical difficulties. This was to do with, bond futures for Bunds, Bobble, BTPs, OATs, various bond products then from governments around Europe. Also for equity futures as well, Eurostoxx 50 DAX and SMI futures. So we are keeping across that. We'll bring you any updates when we get it. Back to to the conversation, and you were talking there about tech. I know another sector that you like with maybe a 5-year view then, Kurt, is renewables. Where specifically do you want to focus here? Because it's a sector that gets mentioned a lot, and I just wonder if we need to be kind of discerning.
Well, I think you do have to be discerning in terms of what you're looking at, because there's a lot of the renewable story which I do think has legs. I think that there's going to be a point where you look at wind farms, for instance, and you look at the pace in which they're growing, the efficiency in which they're able to produce energy. That's going by leaps and bounds. That's an interesting play for us on a medium-term basis. I think the areas you need to avoid is, even if you're going to get what is probably got to be a cyclical rebound because of the fiscal expansion. We talked about the industrial is doing well. I think oil, while you may see a pop over the next 6 months or so, I think the oil down trade is likely to persist. I don't see, a resumption of massive expenditure into carbon-based energies, for the near future. So focused on that. I would still steer clear of solar. But the interesting part is just how much it's growing and how quickly it's growing. It's sort of become intermeshed, in almost record time into the fabric of our consumer behavior now. If you think about the electric scooters, the electric cars that are coming out everywhere, everything's a hybrid, and that's just going to boost the power for renewables around the world.
Yeah, so you think ESG basically is a winner, at least the E of that acronym.
Yeah, I do, and I think that it has less to do with being an ardent environmentalist, and it has entirely to do with market forces. Technology has made renewables relatively cheaper compared to traditional sources of energy, and that technology is going to win the day. And you're going to start to see this shift take place. And one of the interesting things that people don't realize as much is where that shift is taking place perhaps most quickly is the world's second largest economy, which is China, where you have both the people on the ground and the government wanting to be able to pivot away from carbon-based fuels to a more renewable, fuel environment, renewable energy environment.
Kurt, that's an interesting point to leave the conversation. Thanks very much for joining us today. Kurt Custard, Newton Investment Management's CIO. Kurt will be continuing the conversation with us on Bloomberg Radio. That is at 9 a.m. UK time. You can find Matt and I there. Coming up on this programme, Barclays CEO Jez Staley warns a storm is gathering over the UK economy. Hear more from our exclusive conversation next. This is Bloomberg.
Oh no, you hate coming home to a dark house, and you're uptight about noises outside in the night. Outdoor lighting systems cost a fortune, and leaving lights on all night drives utility bills out of sight. You need the Bell & Howell Bionic Spotlight, the outdoor motion sensor light that is motion activated, so it automatically turns on the instant motion is detected and turns off when the motion stops. Bionic Spotlight is solar powered, so there's no expensive wiring or batteries to change. Simply place it where the solar panel can soak up the sun, and you're done. The panel collects the sun's energy to charge all day, so it has the power to provide light when and where you need it all night. Bionic Spotlight looks just like a professional security camera, but is actually a high-tech security light with smart motion sensing technology. Look, the instant the motion sensor detects movement, Bionic Spotlight triggers 8 high-intensity LED lights that shower the entire area with light, covering over 600 square feet. The light stays on for as long as the motion continues, and then shuts off 30 seconds after it stops, so there's no more arriving home to a dark house. Illuminate walkways and stairwells for visitors and guests. Light up your garden at night or the yard for kids and
Okay, new order placed for US dollar Japanese yen at 107.638. This is new position to sell short. New short position opened at US dollar, Japanese yen at 107.638.
In the United States must declare their staff and their finances. They need to do that within 7 days, and urges the US to reverse course on curbs on the media, that what they see as curbs on Chinese media in the US. And all of this comes as a the broader tensions between China and the US are very clear to see, in particular over Hong Kong and the imposition of the new security law, under which, Matt, we've seen a number of arrests taking place overnight already, even though it's just been introduced. We have other breaking news, though, in Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. 30 arrests in the Causeway in Hong Kong. So it looks like the police there, after the security law passage, are doing a little bit of a roundup. In terms of Germany, there's a lot going on here, too. Anna was telling you already about the T-System outage on the German Xetra system. So that's a trading floor issue that we're watching in markets today. Also, the deputy foreign minister is commenting on U.S. sanctions on Nord Stream. So there's a thread, U.S. Sanctions and other countries calling them an intrusion of sovereignty. That's certainly what we're hearing out of Germany, where the deputy foreign minister is saying that the new U.S. pipeline sanctions are, quote, absurd and unacceptable, also saying that these U.S. sanctions on Germany for pushing this Nord Stream Russian gas line project are a grave intrusion of EU sovereignty. So this has been an issue for a long time, but it's kicking up again amid new sanctions that are making it harder and harder for the Germans to build this pipeline with the Russians. The concern, of course, is that Germany is going to buy more and more of this product from Russia, and that's a concern at a time when Putin is doing things like annexing Croatia, annexing Crimea, etc. Now, as the EU reassesses its travel ban, residents in the countries themselves here in the Union are gearing up to hit the road. Alternative data shows that Europeans are preparing for their next holiday, a glimmer of hope that we've been talking about this morning for the struggling travel industry. Joining us to walk through the data is Danny Berger. Danny?
Matt, so Evercore ISI looks at alternative data, specifically downloads of apps that help us travel. And I think this data is so interesting because at the end of the day, we do see a lot of hedge funds and other folks use this to try to look at high-frequency data to get an edge on what the slower frequency data tells us. So the thesis here is that Europeans have a cultural affinity for travel, which means that their recovery will be quicker than the rest of the world. And at least judging by the end of June, we did see app downloads recover quicker in Europe than anywhere else. Interesting to look at places like North America, for example, which looked like it was posing a recovery. You can see it in white there, but since has started to wane as coronavirus cases start to spike. And of course, they're still unable to come to the EU. Now, one of the interesting tidbits within this data, and Matt, I know you talked about this earlier, is the fact that a lot of the downloads are coming from alternative apps. So things like Airbnb, where you're not staying at a chain hotel. This is, of course, worrying to people who are looking for this recovery to support some of these bigger industries, some of these more well-known names.
And let me ask you about, so this is travel from one country to another. We're talking about that opening up. But what about traveling within countries? So from one part of a country to another. Are people back? Are people taking public transport using trains?
That certainly is picking up. If you think about holidays, certainly easier to travel within the country now. But of course, going to your workplace is another thing, mostly by public transportation. We have seen those figures come up. Interestingly, though, if you look at countries like Greece, Athens, preparing for more tourists, they've seen some of the greatest improvements, the closest back to normal in terms of public transportation use. But a place like London, you can see it at the bottom of that chart, is still struggling to get back to normal, still more than 60% away from where they were before the coronavirus outbreak. Now, part of this might be the fact that you have a workforce in places like London who can more easily telework. Still, it has a long way to go to when we're back to normal. So perhaps if you're visiting some of these European countries, you're more likely to use public transportation in Greece and Berlin than you are London. Matt, Anna?
I will say an odd fact that I've heard from a number of different people is that in general, I find people don't want to use public transportation when traveling to work, so they won't use the train to commute to and from work, but on the weekends often have no problem taking public transportation around for leisure activities. So I think that's really, really interesting, and maybe another one of those quirky things. Tyler Cowan, Anna pointed out from our opinions team, wrote a great piece about why and in what situations people won't adhere to lockdowns, and I recommend checking that out. OPIN Go is the command to type on your Bloomberg terminal. Let's get now some of your top stock movers in today's session, and I'll remind you again that some stocks aren't moving. Deutsche Börse says the Eurex T7 system isn't available at the moment, so just for those of you who know what a T7 system is, it's not working. Anyway, in terms of the movers, we do see, well, Airbus isn't one of them, right? It's almost completely unchanged, even as it announces its biggest restructuring of all time, getting rid of 15,000. You can see Bayer is a mover, up 3 1/3%. BP is gaining 2%. Up next, let's talk about build, build, build in the UK. The line from Boris Johnson as he seeks to move past the coronavirus with Adam Marshall.
Our outages can be unpredictable, inconvenient, and disruptive to your life, posing a real threat to your comfort and safety. When the power goes out, you have no lights, no refrigeration, no heating or air conditioning. Your well or sump pump won't work. Your modern daily electronics are rendered useless. And what if the power's out for days or weeks? Are you prepared? You can be with a Generac home standby generator.
24 days we were without power. I had water, I had ice, I had coffee, I had air conditioner. I was able to stay here because of Generac.
When an outage occurs, your Generac home standby generator automatically powers up, so your life goes on without disruption. You and your family are comfortable, safe, and secure. Generac generators run on your home's existing natural gas or propane. And Generac's standard mobile link remote monitoring system keeps you posted on operating status, maintenance updates, and more. Generac generators are designed, engineered, and purpose-built in the USA. Generac is the #1 manufacturer of home standby generators in the world. 8 out of 10 home generators are Generac, with thousands of satisfied customers.
Very good product. Very, very good reviews from everybody.
Prices start at just $19.99, and special financing is available with surprisingly affordable monthly payments. Call now to schedule your free in-home assessment with one of Generac's 6,000 nationwide dealers. The call is free, the assessment is free, and there's no obligation to buy. Plus, if you act now, you'll receive a 7-year extended warranty absolutely free. That's a $695 value. Call now, so the next time there's a power outage, your home powers up. Power your life with Generac. Call or go online to schedule your free in-home assessment today.
Welcome back to the European Market Open. 30 minutes into a trading day that's actually modestly positive now. The CAC 40 is a real weight on the market, down 0.1%, just moving in the other direction. So the other equity markets this morning, we see the FTSE and the DAX slightly positive. Let's have a look at the sectors and where they are on the move then. We have quite an even split really between the sectors. To the upside, oil and gas and basic resources move to the fore. Oil and gas stocks up by 1.3%, and in fact the Brent price is up by, Brent and NYMEX prices are both up by more than 2.5% in this morning's session. So we do see that read across into energy equities. To the downside is a fairly defensive basket of telecoms, food and beverage and utilities. Let's get a Bloomberg First Word News update then. Here are some of the top stories that we're focused on here at Bloomberg. The US is going in the wrong direction when it comes to the coronavirus. That's the warning of infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci. He says daily case counts could more than double to 100,000 if behaviours don't change. Fauci added, clearly we are not in total control right now. He declined to estimate a number of potential virus deaths, but said the total would be very disturbing. Hong Kong police have made their first arrest under the new security law that curtails dissent in the city. It comes less than 24 hours after Chinese lawmakers handed it down. Police say the man was arrested for holding a Hong Kong independence flag. Critics say the law will seriously undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. Keeping the coronavirus under control is vital for economic recovery. That is the message of the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He gave testimony to House lawmakers alongside Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, who reiterated the administration wants to pass another round of fiscal stimulus by the end of July. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson has set out his vision for dragging the British economy out of what may be its deepest recession in 300 years, with a programme to spend billions of pounds on infrastructure to build back to prosperity. But will he be able to rally his party around policies that make great with traditional Conservatives? And what does business make of the proposals? I'm pleased to say, joining us now, Adam Marshall, British Chambers of Commerce Director General. Adam, good to speak to you. We also have your survey out of sentiment among businesses. We will get to that shortly, but I just wanted to start with your reaction to what we heard. There wasn't that much mention of it being like a new deal for the UK economy. Certainly the press coverage ahead of the speech had suggested we might get those references, but maybe the size of it pales in contrast to the New Deal in the US. I mean, was it big enough?
I'm placing an order to buy euro at 112.6.
To boost both business and consumer confidence. So we've got to see this as a series of measures. Infrastructure yesterday, we're going to need to see support for employment, support for investment, and much more besides over the weeks ahead.
So not enough. I mean, clearly, Adam, the £5 billion pound figure pales even in 1930s numbers to the actual New Deal in comparison. What would you like to see, though? What would be, if you had a wish list, what would be up at the top?
Well, of course, we do have a wish list built on what business communities all across the UK have been saying to us, and built on an incredible wealth of data and information about business performance and business expectations. One of the things that we're going to need to see is a cut to some of the input costs facing businesses. So employment-related taxes, business rates, and other costs. Companies should be focused on paying their people and their suppliers right now, not paying the tax man, because that, of course, course, will help them and the wider economy to recover. We're also going to need to see some form of demand stimulus as well. Consumers are not getting out there as quickly or as heartily as needs to happen for the economy to recover strongly. So it may take the form of a cut to VAT. It may take the form of some vouchers to encourage households back onto high streets and into town centres across the country. But that demand stimulus is going to be important too. And finally, of course, we've got a huge number of young people who we worry could be the most affected by this crisis, their life chances and their employment chances. So we're going to need to see some wage subsidies to get young people into the labour market and to help employers have the confidence to take them on. So there's a big prescription here, a lot of measures that are going to be needed in order to cure what is currently ailing the UK economy.
And we'll see whether the Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been listening to any of those suggestions, a lot of suggestions that you've made there, Adam, about what needs to be done for the UK economy. I know that you've also put out your quarterly economic survey. I was reading it, and it was just a sort of a list of item after item that just seems to be worse than ever before. What surprised you then? Let's start with that, shall we? What surprised you about this quarterly survey? I mean, it was clearly pretty dire.
Well, unfortunately, Anna, not very much surprised us, given what we'd been hearing from the ground level across the UK in recent weeks. So of the 14 indicators we've been tracking for the last 30 years, 11 of them are now at their historic lows, and the other 3 are not far off. So it is probably one of the worst quarters in memory for British business. But we all knew that, with a significant chunk of the economy being closed. I suppose what I'm most concerned about is that the forward-looking indicators, so questions about whether businesses have recruitment intentions going forward, what their confidence is in what their turnover is likely to be, and what their forward orders look like, all of those indicators were pretty dismal. And that's why we think the stimulus is going to be needed to get things moving again. It's not a surprise to see the historic and backward-looking data pretty dire, but it is a concern that when looking ahead, businesses are lacking in confidence and they need that confidence restored.
In that case, I wonder how feasible it is, Adam, for there to be apprenticeships and work placements for all the young people in the UK, something Boris Johnson is promising. It doesn't sound like there are enough openings.
Well, it's only feasible, of course, if the businesses feel confident to take people on and train them. That's why we've set a wage subsidy for apprenticeships and work experience and things like that is going to be so important over the coming months, because there will be a recovery in business conditions, whether it's toward the back end of this year or into 2021. There will be a rebound, and businesses will be out needing to increase capacity, needing to take on new staff as well. We want them to have the confidence to do that, and we also want them to be able to take on those who might be leaving school, leaving university, and trying to get into the labour market. Otherwise, the government's going to find itself paying for that generation to be out of work or underemployed for a very long time to come, and that would be a far worse outcome.
Adam, thanks so much for joining us today. Adam Marshall, British Chambers of Commerce Director General, talking to us about the suggestion of a new deal to build in the UK and what he wants, the BCC wants for British businesses. Now, up next, as China enacts sweeping powers to silence the city's dissidents, making its first arrest today, more than 30 people have been arrested amid protests, and the country is saying that those arrests in Hong Kong will be handled according to the law. That law, of course, just passed. I want to quickly tell you about the Riksbank in Sweden. It says it's prepared to cut below zero if that's deemed effective. It also is expanding its purchases to 500 billion Swedish krona from 300 billion Swedish krona. So now the Swedish Riksbank's purchase program is going to be expanded by to 500 billion kroner, which is about $53 billion. This is Bloomberg.
Today's new normal. Face coverings are essential, even required in certain environments. Now, there's Copperfit Guardwell Face Protector, our most advanced and durable copper-infused fabric woven into a full face protector. With a sure-fit, non-slip design for all-day comfort to help give you peace of mind in today's uncertain world. An easy-to-breathe, thermal-regulated fabric with smart technology to keep you comfortable and cool. And a lightweight fabric with UPF 30 face protection against harsh elements. And unlike disposable coverings, you can wash Guardwell Face Protector with soap to give you the clean face protection you need. Designed with smart technology fabric, reinforced stitching, and stay-dry wicking absorption, Copperfit Guardwell is built to last, and it's copper-infused into our soft stretch fabric to kill unwanted odor-causing bacteria. A stylish, easy-to-breathe, and sure-fit garment. Built-in smart technology with UPF 30 to keep cool and comfortable in harsh environments. Washable and reusable, so you are never without protection. And copper-infused to kill odor-causing bacteria. Copperfit Guardwell is the most comfortable, breathable, and built-to-last face protector you will ever wear. Guaranteed, or your money back. Copperfit Guardwell is in stock now for immediate delivery, but demand is very high and supplies are limited, so don't wait. We know these are difficult times, so we made special arrangements to send you 2 copper-infused Guardwell face protectors for a limited time for only $19.99. Order online now at getguardwell.com or call 1-800-970-4281. That's 2 face protectors so you can wash one and wear one. For only $19.99, but call or go online now. We're here for you, America. Don't settle for ordinary. Ask for the original by name. Copperfit Guardwell Face Protector.
Investors, want cash flow? NRIA is making an accommodation. We are extending higher than normal 10% monthly electronic payouts right now from our real estate-backed Class A buildings fund. You'll receive steady 10% monthly payments and total returns targeted with bonus at 18 to 21%. NRIA's 14-year track record and $850 million of new construction income property backs you. Get 10% monthly electronic cash flow right now. Call 201-210-2727.
Welcome back to the European Market Open. 42 minutes into a trading day that has European equity markets actually a little bit more buoyant than anticipated, up by around 0.1%. But US futures flat and negative right now. Let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash for you. Here are some of the top corporate stories we're covering this morning at Bloomberg. FedEx shares soared after earnings beat Wall Street expectations. The courier said it held costs in check with a mix of job cuts and reduced compensation. It is also delaying investment in some projects. A drop in fuel costs helped the company offset the $125 million needed to protect workers from COVID-19. Airbus is planning to cut 15,000 jobs as part of the biggest restructuring in its history. About 10,000 of that will come from its main bases in Germany and France. The company says output will be about 40% lower than expected for 2 years. That's due to a dramatic slump in demand brought on by the pandemic. Goldman Sachs may be nearing a deal to resolve its biggest legal threat in a decade. The Wall Street lender is hoping to avoid a guilty plea for its role in the 1MDB scandal. Prosecutors allege Goldman helped Malaysia raise money, some of which ended up being diverted to 1MDB officials and their associates. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission says Huawei and ZTE are national security threats. The move prohibits federal subsidies being used to buy their equipment. The FTC says both companies have close ties to the Communist Party and China's military. The U.S. has repeatedly argued Huawei's equipment can be used for spying, a claim that the company denies. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Matt?
Now, Hong Kong police have made their first arrests under the security law. The city is today marking 23 years of overall rule from China, with Beijing cracking down on citizens protesting. 30 arrests reportedly made in the Causeway. One man arrested in a park for holding a flag. Joining us live from Hong Kong is Bloomberg's Sophie Cameruden. Sophie, what do we know about the new security law that's been enacted, the specifics, and this arrest?
Measures have been taken within 24 hours of the new security bill being passed by Chinese lawmakers here in Hong Kong. The police force is out. We have seen trucks and riot police patrolling the streets. Searches have been conducted. We have seen some bouts of commotion where pepper spray was used. A water cannon was out in a neighborhood just to the west of us. That was deployed as well. So it looks like tactics are being used by the police to disperse crowds as best they can to prevent them from gathering, which could lead to heightened tension perhaps. But as you can see around me, there's plenty of people around, just largely peaceful for the most part, aside from those moments of tension. And we've heard people chant protest slogans. We heard strains of the anthem "Glory to Hong Kong" being sung as well by some protesters earlier in that part of Causeway Bay. So there still is a lot of momentum, it would seem, for protests to take place here in the city.
And Sophie, what are the specifics of this law? Because for many months we've talked about this without knowing very much about the detail, but now we have some of that detail.
In the 5 weeks leading up to the approval of this new bill, there was a lot of speculation about what would actually be provided for, whether a death penalty would be imposed, whether it would be implemented retroactively. Neither of those provisions have been made in the 6 chapters and 66 articles outlined in this new legislation. The focus is on 4 key offenses, that of terrorism, subversion of state power, secession, and collusion with foreign forces. The maximum penalty for the most serious offenders under those dictums would be for life imprisonment. But again, no death penalty will be implemented. Alongside these provisions, what also is causing some concern is the reach of the bill. It's extraterritorial. That means that Hong Kong residents living in the city and those abroad could perhaps fall afoul of the new bill, along with non-residents of Hong Kong. So again, it's quite political, the nature of the bill when it comes to trying to prevent criticism of the government.
Well, and you definitely, because of that, want to be very careful when you're in Hong Kong, regardless of whether you're a citizen or not. Sophie, what are the implications for businesses there on the ground and businesses international that want to do business in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong is still seen as a gateway to China, given that is a capital hub. We've seen IPO, the pipeline there, build up as well. Several companies have come out in support of the bill, namely HSBC. We have other big-named banks, for example, like Barclays, say they don't want to get involved with the politics. So the underlying message to businesses are, if you want to be here, if you want to maintain your links to the city, stay out of politics.
Free Hong Kong. All right, Sophie Cameruden reporting for us there live from Hong Kong amid what appeared to be fairly peaceful protests in those pictures. When Sophie was on earlier, of course, we saw a lot of police activity and have seen police shooting some kind of weapons there, what appear to be maybe rubber bullets or some sort of tear gas gun. We're going to continue to cover this for you after at least 30 arrests were made in the Causeway area and one man arrested overnight for flying a flag in a park. Up next, big oil under pressure with European oil companies suffering write-downs of billions and billions of dollars. America's biggest oil companies are coming under increasing pressure to disclose the long-term crude price assumptions that we've already seen.
something else.
All right,
It's very interesting because we actually had a
profit.
conversation with someone about this on TV earlier, and it really does seem like a done deal that Putin is going to hold on to power until 2036, despite what we've seen with the economy from coronavirus.
It does seem to be that he's going to seize the moment to rule, as you said, until he's actually 83. And that comes even amid fading popularity in the country. We've seen his sort of polls at an all-time low, but people are going to go out and vote. I think it's a national holiday in Russia today, if I'm right, so people will head to the polls, and it is highly expected to pass.
But I think there's a little sideline to this, which we covered, interestingly, on Bloomberg last week, that, in fact, the number of people who vote may not be all that great, just because their disillusion will be visible in that, perhaps, rather than the actual results, and that this may be not such a good sign for Putin going forward, particularly if oil continues to be a little more risky in terms of the way it's backing up the Russian economy.
Interesting. Leanne Gerrans with the World News, thank you so much. Now let's get back to the outlook for the second half of the year. Joining us down the line, Jiro Jung, Chief Economist at Mirabaud. Jiro, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Great to have you with us. It was an interesting first half, to say the least. You take a look at what equities did, worst quarter in the first quarter since 2008. Then we had the best quarter in 11 years for global stocks. US stocks had their best quarter since 1998. But if we look at the economic outlook for the second half, Bloomberg Economics says goodbye Victory V and hello Worry W. Does your outlook chime with that?
We predict a significant rebound in the major advanced economies, including in the US and in Europe. But what comes out of the data is that the numbers by the end of this year will not be at levels that we've seen last year. So overall, the net loss, the deadweight loss due to the crisis is clearly there.
But here, isn't the problem that there's an awful lot out there of potential trouble that could completely displace this prediction of a full recovery? I mean, we know that there may well be a second virus wave. We know that there already seems to be a continuation of the first in quite a damaging way in the US, and we still don't really know when or indeed if a vaccine is around the corner. I mean, all this surely weighs very heavily on any sort of recovery.
Sure, but what certainly is likely to stimulate the recovery is the extraordinary stimulus done by central banks and also by fiscal authorities. Just to give you a very precise number, for the G7 countries, we have fiscal stimulus announced that amounts to about 12% of GDP. That's basically 3 times more to the 4% we've seen between 2008 and 2010. So the fiscal stimulus clearly is there, and the monetary stimulus, of course, also is unprecedented.
Now, the problem, though, with the fiscal stimulus, though, Jiro, is that we are expecting a lot of support to start coming away in the autumn, particularly in relation to the labour market. So what are you expecting in terms of unemployment figures, let's say for the US, for example? And if they do turn out to be as bad as some of the expectations, could we actually see a very significant hit to demand in the second half of the year?
Sure, that is a main problem, and we do see a significant rebound. If we look, for example, at the June surveys, they rebounded quite nicely, which is encouraging. But if you look into the details, the sub-indices on employment remain actually quite weak. We see today the manufacturing ISM survey in the US, for instance, that is likely to show that actually the sub-index on employment will continue to contract. What we also notice is that unemployment rates will remain quite elevated, and here I'm reminded of the last FOMC meeting earlier in June, and the Fed itself predicts actually that the unemployment rate will be north of 9% by the end of this year, and even in 2 years and a half will remain above the so-called equilibrium level of 4%, which is currently estimated to reach 5.5% by the Fed itself. So this certainly is something that will remain with us for a long time, yes.
Here, isn't there also an issue to do with stimulus being a very blunt tool? It lifts all boats. It basically means that many companies that are actually pretty weak anyway continue to get support, and that can have a damaging longer-term effect on the economy. And, you know, we may see defaults, but perhaps not as many defaults as we should.
Sure, moral hazard.
Bitcoin. I'm placing a new order to sell short Bitcoin at 9,143,735. 9,143. Let's put 1944. Okay.
Why interest rates, for instance, will remain very low.
Hero, some people have pointed to the coordination in the global response to the last financial crisis, in contrast to the lack of synchronicity that we're seeing with this crisis. Do you see that being a problem? And if so, which economies globally are likely to outperform and which to underperform?
What comes out of the, especially when we look, for example, at high-frequency data, is that those countries that implemented less strict lockdown measures seem to be doing better, seem to be rebounding much more strongly than others. So, for example, if we look at Apple or Google mobility data in Europe, for instance, it seems that those countries, and they're mainly in Northern Europe, like Germany, the Netherlands, where government measures, lockdown measures, were less strict, that the activity levels are springing up quite much more importantly than in other countries. This is certainly one issue that we have in mind. Yeah.
And in the US, by contrast, I mean, high-frequency data there isn't looking good at the moment. Doesn't this cast a shadow?
No, sure. I mean, if we look very specifically at the weekly initial jobless claims, for instance, numbers, and we saw that last week, the numbers that came out last Thursday show that, for instance, in Arizona, the number of jobless claims went up by something like 33% during the week, which is certainly in line or moving in tandem to the dramatic rise in COVID-19 cases in that area. And we're likely to see similar numbers in other areas, especially in the south in the U.S., where the COVID-19 pandemic is gaining ground.
Hero Young, Chief Economist at Mirabaud, great to have you with us on the show today. Thank you so much.
I'm placing a new order to buy British pound. At 123,740.
We're on it to send a rather super electrician in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London.
New position open on British pound and 123.74.
With Matt in Berlin. Let's get to some data, shall we, Matt? And we've got Euro area June manufacturing PMIs, 47.4. The prelim number was 46.9. So the good news is it's better than the preliminary estimate. It's moving in the right direction, closer to 50, but it is still in contraction territory. And we don't really know how much to rely on these PMI numbers just now, given they are kind of sentiment indexes, aren't they? And how that actually ends up translating into economic output is still a good question, given what these markets have been through and what these purchasing managers who are surveyed for this data have been through.
People love them, though. Anna,
people do love them, and we always should bring the latest data to you. But we see fairly flat, or not really much reaction, I should say, in the euro on the back of what's been a whole slew of PMI data points this morning. So 112.32 is where we trade for euro dollar right now.
Almost all of them beats, by the way. I just want to point out, if you type EcoGo on your Bloomberg and then you put European Union into the box, you can see all of the national and intra-national numbers that have come out. So almost everyone we've reported today, even though, for example, Spain, not above 50, Germany, not above 50, but better than the forecast had been, better than the survey number. So even though they're not getting to expansion in many countries, as they are, for example, in France, they're beating almost everywhere with the exception of, as far as I can see, Italy and the Czech Republic.
And that is good news, so let's take it where we can get it, shall we? And what is that doing to equity markets? Well, not a great deal, but we have had a fairly flat session, really, Matt, for equity markets this morning. The Stock 600 up 0.1%. The FTSE underperforms. The CAC 40 underperforms. The ZDAX is relatively very strong, up by around 0.7% this morning. The US futures picture is flat to negative, so we're down by between 1 and 0.2% for US stock indexes, so not by much. It is, of course, a holiday-shortened week in the United States, and so markets will be closed for an event of some kind. Can't remember, Matt, that's taking place on Friday, but we will get some jobs data before that. I'm enjoying messing with you, Matt. Right, the oil price up by 2% this morning, and so we see oil stocks doing quite well, and not a great deal of movement in many of the FX crosses, but we do see some movement in the yen.
It is Saturday, by the way.
It is Saturday, but there's a holiday on Friday.
No, well, okay, yes.
No?
But the actual Day of Independence on which we Americans celebrate, throwing off the yoke of, United Kingdom control,
but hey, we're
getting rid of the taxation of the king for
without
all colonies
representation
is on Friday. And I got a special pedicure in commemoration of that.
Yes, and I'm just very thankful that this is radio, so you can't share that with our listeners.
Let's talk. I have a quasi German American guest to bring on. So we'll talk about this with Kurt Custard. He's the Chief Investment Officer at Newton Investment Management. We had him on television earlier, and we love to have guests on from Newton Investment Management. Kurt is, what you were telling me, you're German, but you grew up in California, right? And that's where I think we see some of the biggest problems, Kurt, California, in terms of the COVID-19 crisis. How much of a concern is the really worrying growth, for humanity, worrying growth in coronavirus cases for you as a market participant?
Well,
that's a great question, because obviously, first and foremost, it's the humanitarian side of it that impacts me. I have family out there, and I've been out there a fair amount. In fact, I'm going out there again, hopefully in a couple of weeks. But I think from a market perspective, what you're seeing is you're going to see a pretty decent strain on the medical system in a variety of states. California very much varies county by county. L.A. Imperial County, they're not doing well. San Diego is doing better. So, you have to look at where these things, the regional impact of where they're going to hit. From a broader perspective, the fact that they're having to roll back all of the openings, throughout the South and the Sun Belt in the United States, it's bad for the SME sector. I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, the idea that they're going to keep the bars open, but they're not going to allow them to serve alcohol, to me, is slightly comical. I don't know how many people are going to go hang out inside a bar and drink water. So, I do think this is going to continue to persist for a while in the U.S. It is interesting, the American reaction versus the European reaction towards the whole COVID thing. I've spent 15 of the last 18 years here in Europe. The Americans are sort of behaving like the Americans have a tendency to do, which is that they're not great at being told what to do, especially by the government. And so when you've seen this massive resurgence in cases in the U.S. right now, I think a large part of that is that rebelliousness sort of manifesting.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see whether Western democracies in all their forms, with all their different cultural idiosyncrasies, whether they manage to get a handle on these flare-ups. And that will matter to markets, won't it? Another thing that really matters to markets is how much support there will be from governments and also from central banks. Kurt, what do you expect from the whole conversation around the Fed right now? We hear from the Fed this week that containing the virus is the important thing. But what do we need to see from the Fed from here? They've done a lot already. They are big players now in some of these big markets. What else can they still do?
Well, I think that the Fed has always sort of worked primarily by moral suasion. Increasingly, as you commented on, they're directly intervening in the market. It's very interesting because I think that they're doing probably the right thing for now to be able to support the market, et cetera. But after the GFC, they don't have a lot of firepower left. And they're increasingly having to get to what I would call more direct interventionalist kind of responses to any kind of economic crisis. And what that does is while that supports the market in the near term, it sort of dampens down their ability to act in future crises, right? So you every time you raise the bar, right? So when are they going to start buying equities, as an example, or when are they going to start buying, asset classes that they're currently not permissioned to buy? And that's something that I think is potentially down in the pipe. And that, for me, as a capitalist, as somebody who participates in the markets, I don't want a long-term environment where, the government, in any form, in any government, is a massive market participant.
But you do want to know when they're going to start buying equities and hopefully pick the companies they buy before it happens, right? I mean...
Okay, I'm on Bitcoin. I sold short at 1,144.
Politics of them buying individual stocks would be so fraught that I would hesitate to go there if I were anyone on the Fed board. But I do think it does create a distortion. We're in an environment now where the level of debt in the U.S. and in China is becoming the tail that wags the dog instead of the other way around. And we just have to be very careful of that. I mean, the last time we've seen debt levels this high were after World War II, and it took both the U.K. and the U.S. a long time to work that down. And we're sort of nearing that circumstance now. I mean, the level of indebtedness suggests that we can't have rates go up without starting to impair the ability for companies to pay.
The UK took till the 90s, I think, to pay back some of that debt to the US. As we navigate, as investors now try to navigate then their way through the headwinds created by coronavirus, the geopolitics that is very present for us with tensions between the US and China, where do you look then for opportunities, Kurt? If you've got sort of a 5-year view, we asked you about tech and renewables on TV earlier, but also emerging markets, where are you selectively looking in EM?
Well, it's really interesting because the emerging markets should be an area of growth. I mean, not only are they naturally having an emerging middle class in places like China and India, which are huge, massive market segments. I mean, they just dwarf almost any other consumer behavior. But you've also had, at least in the case of China, them actually coming through the COVID crisis relatively unscathed. The challenge will be sort of now navigating the politics, because clearly the U.S. administration is concerned about, the rise of China and Chinese egress. The law that just took place 24 hours ago in Hong Kong is a huge change from the environment Hong Kong used to operate in. I mean, the law is so vaguely worded now that it potentially could create frictions with the U.S. And I think all these geopolitical sort of issues are going to have to make navigating where you invest in these markets, much more specific. No longer can you really buy an ETF or just a broad China play. I think you have to start getting down into individual names and looking at individual sectors within those economies.
Kurt, we all know that polls can be misleading, and this early, they don't mean too much. For example, Donald Trump was looking like he was going to get trounced by Hillary Clinton this time 4 years ago. But, assuming that this poll has a little more weight, Joe Biden seems to be at least 10 points up on Donald Trump. What do you think would happen? How would markets react to a Biden win?
Well, I don't like to really comment on politics too much, but I can tell you that I don't think there's been much change in the tax structure baked into current equity market prices in the U.S. And so if you were to suggest that the tax structure is going to change, that is going to have an impact. Now, I don't think, having, read the tea leaves to the extent that I am, and I want to, point out that I'm not a political analyst, but it doesn't seem that especially given COVID, major tax increases are on the table. But we could see a change, in things around. I mean, there's been a lot of social justice movement discussions going on in the U.S. Income inequality throughout the West has been a hot button issue, and so it wouldn't surprise me to start to see those kind of topics come into the election discussion after, either going into or just after the election in November.
Kurt, thanks so much. Thanks for talking to us on TV and radio. Kurt Custard, CIO at Newton Investment Management.
Let's get over to Carolyn Hepker now with Global News Headlines. Carolyn?
Thanks so much, Matt. Hong Kong police say that they have made their first 2 arrests under the new security law that gives Beijing broad powers to rein in sources of opposition. It comes less than 24 hours after Chinese lawmakers handed it down. Police say they have arrested a man holding a Hong Kong independence flag and later a woman with a sign reading Hong Kong independence. Critics say the law will seriously undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. The US is going in the wrong direction when it comes to the coronavirus. That's the warning of infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci. He says that daily cases could more than double to 100,000 if behaviours don't change. In his testimony to the Senate yesterday, Fauci also said that he's aspirationally hopeful that a vaccine will be ready by early 2021.
We are cautiously optimistic, looking at animal data and the early preliminary data, that we will at least know the extent of efficacy sometime in the winter and early part of next year.
Here in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson unveiled his plan for the UK to build its way back to prosperity, but the package met immediate criticism from opponents who claim it offers no new money and falls well short of the Roosevelt-style New Deal the government had touted only the night before. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Thanks very much. We'll be right back with more market action. This is Bloomberg.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband, Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Sudden shock or sustained slowdown? When uncertainty threatens, shareholders look to the C-suite to maintain profitability. And for 2 decades, the leaders of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies have turned to GEP for results. GEP's procurement and supply chain solutions help reduce costs, improve performance, and boost EBITDA, helping great companies stay on track and primed for the next phase of the business cycle. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Guy Johnson.
Despite the tough environment, the French automaker Citroën is launching a new electric crossover. Vincent Kobe, the Citroën CEO, joining us now. Vincent Kobe, thank you very much indeed for your time. Some might argue this is a tough time to launch a new car. What are your expectations for this new vehicle? How do you think it is going to sell in the coronavirus environment?
Yeah, first, thanks very much for having me. And as you all know, the industry has been shaken by the recent crisis, but we still believe it's a proper time to launch a car like the new C4. The market has evolved a lot. We're talking purchase pattern, we're talking powertrain, but I think the demand, and we saw that in the last weeks, at least in continental Europe, has been extremely strong coming out of the crisis. Obviously, the type of transportation, the distance of travel will evolve, the economic powers will be, at play, but we still believe that there's a lot of demand for individual mobility, for, the protective cocoon a car is, and obviously we're launching this new C4 with a fully electric alternative, which we believe will address the growing, concern or interest for sustainability.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg QuickTake. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Danny Berger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, we are in the start of the second half of the year. Stocks starting this half with a whimper after a roaring second quarter. We're seeing European stocks higher by just 3 basis points. Meanwhile, U.S. futures lower by 8 basis points. Really not a lot of movement here. I should say volumes off as well. If you look at the Euro Stoxx 50, we're off 70% of volumes that we usually are at this point of day, looking at the 20-day average, so not a lot of action. FTSE 100 dropping 4 basis points to 61.67. The DAX, however, is higher, up about 0.6%. Really, the thing leading the way here are oil and gas stocks. That's allowing the index to move into the green somewhat. Meanwhile, we are seeing WTI higher, likewise nearing a 4-month high. Speaking of commodities, we're also looking at gold rallying today, passing $1,800 an ounce. That's for the first time since 2011. Now, meanwhile, we're looking at other assets really stuck in a range here. The Bloomberg dollar spot also range bound, trading around 12.20 rather. The euro dipping slightly earlier. Now it's back up just 7 basis points though versus the dollar trading at 1.12. We're looking at the pound. A similar story here, just barely higher today at 1.24. Meanwhile, we're looking at bonds, again, the same story. We're looking at the yield on the 10-year increasing just 2 basis points to 0.68. Bunds raising 2 basis points as well, still though at a negative 43. And gilts, again, not much movement, just a 10 basis point gain. Now, it might be ahead of that 4th of July holiday in the U.S. We're not getting a lot of action, but there was action in China. The CSI 300 index made its highest close in 28 months today. Quite a powerful vote of confidence despite that intense pressure from the U.S. But again, elsewhere, not a ton of action today. And that's the Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Caroline Hepker with more on what's going on around the world. Caroline.
Thanks so much, Danny. Almost 90% of Americans are dissatisfied with the state of their country. That's according to a new study from the Pew Research Center. And the unhappiness is hitting the perception of President Donald Trump. He is now 10 percentage points behind the expected Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. According to the survey, 54% of registered voters back Biden, 44% support Trump. In Australia, officials in the state of Victoria are reimposing lockdowns in several Melbourne suburbs amid a spike in virus infections. The measures take effect today and will last until at least the 29th of July, with people allowed out only for essential reasons. International flights into Melbourne will be diverted for the next 2 weeks. And here in the UK, children in Leicester will be heading to school for the last time for at least another 2 weeks today. The city has been put into a localised lockdown, meaning that classrooms will have to shut tomorrow. The decision to extend measures like closing non-essential shops was taken following a spike in cases of coronavirus in the city. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Anna?
Caroline, thank you very much. We have European equity markets then kind of treading water, I was going to say, but actually making some slightly modest gains right now, up around 0.2%. The FTSE 100 is a bit of a laggard, but I think we're going to talk geopolitics and talk about what's going on in Hong Kong. Sophie Cameron, our colleague, joins us from there now. And Sophie, we have not had long for people in Hong Kong to get used to the imposition of this new security law brought in by the Chinese this week. And yet we already see an arrest under this security law. Tell us a bit more about this arrest.
Yeah, and I have to say it's quite surreal. It's a year on from the protest last year that saw the Ledgeco being broken into. I'm in Victoria Park in Causeway Bay, where there are hundreds of people who are gathered. They're milling about. They've not been able to really form a unified column, if you will, to march to any single destination. But again, they are coming out in response to this security bill being passed by Chinese lawmakers, bypassing Hong Kong's legislative council in doing so. Within the 24 hours of this bill being passed, 2 individuals have been arrested under the new bill, and the police have been updating on Twitter the total number of arrests. Over 70 so far have been arrested for participating in unauthorized assemblies and other related offenses, including 2 for suspectedly violating the national security law. That is according to the latest update from police on Twitter.
So what does all of this mean, Sophie, for local businesses or for international businesses that want to, earn revenue in China and Hong Kong?
Firstly, Matt, taking on the perspective of the local business environment, leading up to the release of the bill on Tuesday night, you already had so-called yellow businesses removing some paraphernalia that is related to the demonstrations. You had Joshua Wong, one of the activists here promoting democracy in the city, resigning from the Democisto party. So there's a sense that there's a need to understand where you may run afoul of the law and what measures you can take to ensure that you can continue voicing out your thoughts and ensuring that freedom is maintained. But today we are seeing how that is in action. Again, police are we have heavy police presence. They're trying to spell crowds, but it is largely peaceful, I have to say. Just now, it looks like some kind of pepper spray or rubber bullet was used in the immediate area. So I'm just seeing some smoke in the distance here, but people are moving away from that area right now.
Okay, Sophie, and I guess we need you to stay safe as well, so we'll let you go. Sophie Cameron joining us there from Hong Kong. Really interesting to see the many legs to the tensions we see between China and the United States at the moment then, Matt. Just earlier on today, of course, we saw Chinese response to what it sees as media incursion, if you like, or suppression of Chinese media in the US. And so the Chinese making their own announcements about what US media needs to do in China. That's one leg to it, of course. And of course, the Chinese saying that they will retaliate if the US imposes any sanctions on China over Hong Kong.
Yeah, so a lot going on there. And just to paint a picture, you know, because it's radio, Sophie Cameron all morning has been standing amidst protesters and police. At one point, we saw police firing what appeared to be either rubber bullets or tear gas. So she's wearing a bright yellow vest that says press. Nonetheless, we want her to stay as safe as she can. It's great to get that intelligence.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. Netflix says Colin Kaepernick is joining with Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Ava DuVernay on a Netflix drama series about the teenage roots of the former NFL player's activism. Netflix says Colin, in black and white, will examine Kaepernick's high school years to illuminate the experiences that shaped his advocacy. Further casting details and a release date were not immediately announced. The Chicago Bears are offering full refunds to season ticket holders because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And NASCAR may be racing during the coronavirus pandemic, but celebrating in early December now is off the schedule. The Motorsport Series has canceled its Champions Week and Cup Series awards scheduled for early December in Nashville, citing the uncertainty from the coronavirus pandemic and its impact on the industry. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
This July 4th, tune in to the Boston Pops right from your home. For greatest hits, finest moments, guest artists, and a special performance of a stirring salute to America's heroes. From first responders to essential workers, we honor those giving their all in this time of need. A Boston Pops salute to our heroes, presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. Watch and listen from home Saturday night starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
Not completing high school. Different adapts. Different overcomes. Different keeps moving. Different keeps thinking. Different stays connected. Different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most. Hi, Mum. From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards, live from London. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. It's just gone 9:30 here in London. And let's get to some breaking news, some data across the Bloomberg. The UK June manufacturing PMI has come in at 50.1. That is entirely unchanged versus the preliminary number, also 50.1. So that is good news in the sense we don't have any deterioration in that particular data point. And it is just above 50, which suggests some economic expansion, which is a little bit of good news. We'll take that. Let's have a look at some of the data we've got then.
Club.
What, being above 50, you mean?
Yes, only the UK and France in the Euro, in the Eurozone, in the Euro, what should we call it? In the European continental shelf, let's say.
Is it wider than the Eurozone?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not in the Eurozone, you're not in the European Union. But I know a lot of British people like to consider themselves European still, so you can say that you're on the shelf.
Let's not start that one again. Very much in Europe, if not the EU. Right, the Stock 600 is up by around 0.25% right now. The FTSE 100 is a bit of a laggard, down 0.1%. The CAC 40 also weaker by 0.25%, but the Xetra DAX actually up by 0.7% this morning. US futures, if you're looking ahead to the US trading day, US futures suggest some weakness at the start of the day, down 1 or 0.2% at the start of trading. We've got the dollar on the back foot actually this morning, so we don't see an entirely risk-off picture coming forward, coming through on these equity markets. But when we look at FX, we do see a little bit of movement into the yen and certainly out of the dollar. And that movement into the yen is with the dollar yen. It's also with euro yen and the pound yen. So we're watching the Japanese currency with interest. On the commodities side of things, we see some enthusiasm for oil, at least, with the price of a barrel of oil on Brent at 42.31. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Brussels edition, Bloomberg's briefing on what matters most in the European Union this week.
Welcome to this new episode of the Brussels edition. We are joined by our reporter in Brussels, Maria Tadeo, and this week we're looking at Angela Merkel and Germany as the country takes over the rotating presidency of the European Union for the next 6 months.
Yes, and Matt, you are in Berlin, and you know there's so much happening for Angela Merkel, Germany. The short term, of course, it's the recovery fund, but over the next year, we're going to have to deal with the Brexit negotiations, the U.S. election, China, perhaps even more tariffs. And the one line that Angela Merkel keeps repeating, which I find fascinating, is the fact that there is no time to waste.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really interesting about faces, too, right? Just a year ago, there were two narratives. One that, she was in the twilight of her career, that her power was waning, Angela Merkel. And the other, for so long, that Germany was unwilling to spend money, any more money, especially to help the peripheral states, which, German citizens are always so worried about having to work so hard for so long and pay so much taxes. They feel like they're supporting people in peripheral states that retire earlier and don't typically pay taxes to the same extent. In any case, the corona crisis has changed that. Merkel has built a lot of power and a renewed political base because of the way Germany was able to handle the pandemic, and because of how frugal the Germans were. They have so much money and credit and can spend it now that it's necessary.
Exactly. And what's also interesting, again, going back to the point that you made, is that she's fundamentally moved on those red lines. As you pointed out, they're now willing to spend money. That was a big question mark for a very long time. And she's also now saying it's okay to take on more debt. It's good for the European Union in the extent that we need to prop up this recovery, and we have to do this collectively. And I think the question that's really being asked both in Berlin, where you are, but also here in Brussels, is really, why is Angela Merkel doing this, and why is she doing it right now? And to talk about this, we're now joined, I'm happy to say, by Jana Pollerin, who is the head of the Berlin office and a senior policy fellow for the European Council of Foreign Relations, and she's joining us on the phone. Good morning.
Hey.
And I guess a question, I'm just going to throw it to you, is why is Angela Merkel doing this right now?
Because she perceives the coronavirus crisis as a real existential threat to the European Union, which is, kind of unprecedented. She says this is the biggest challenge that we are facing since the Second World War, and I think she really was worried that the EU might fall apart when we had the negotiations about the corona bonds and kind of the toxic debate re-emerging that we know from the Eurozone crisis.
So, that's an interesting debate that seems to still be happening, Jana. I mean, even though Merkel and Macron are backing this plan for the European Union to borrow as one, it would seem like shared debt to me. We talk to, CDU lawmakers all the time who are like, no, it won't be shared debt. Are we looking at the first time Germany is willing to step into?
In Germany, what Angela Merkel repeats, and especially when talking to her own party, is that she emphasizes this is a one-off situation. This is unique in history. This will not be permanent. This will not be repeated. This recovery fund is something that we need to do now, but this is not the new normal in German thinking on the economic and monetary union.
That's what they always say.
Yeah, in the South.
Jana, let me tell you something. I'm still paying a solidarity tax so that East and West Germany can get together. That was over 30 years ago, and that was a one-off thing then, too. It's been 3 decades.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think especially in the South and in France, this is perceived as a radical change in Germany's position on EU debt mutualization, and they think that Germany has all of a sudden become more Southern, and this has all given rise to the expectation that the economic and monetary union will be quickly developed further. But that is not the story you hear when you talk to conservative lawmakers. So it's really the question whether this Hamiltonian moment, first of all, is one, and second, whether there is a permanent and structural change in the German position.
And Jan, I'm always curious, and not to be Machiavellian here, but you're saying Angela Merkel really gets that this is a moment of almost make or break for the European Union. But I do wonder, Germany is a country that makes a lot of things, makes them well, and makes money from selling them to other countries. Is there an element here of just self-preservation for Germany?
No, absolutely. And Angela Merkel makes that very transparent and clear, but I think it's good that she does it and that she explains to the German citizens that we have kind of a national interest in preserving the Eurozone and in helping the other countries, that we don't do that for altruistic reasons, but that we have a clear interest in doing this. And I think the communication this time is pretty good coming from the government, much better than during the Eurozone crisis or during the migration crisis.
So are they going to be able to get it through? You've got the famed Frugal Four who had been against this. I think the vote's coming up, January 27th? Is this going to happen?
Well, this is the biggest expectation, I think, on the EU Council presidency for Germany to deliver, to somehow convince the frugals to buy into that big recovery fund deal, and also to get an agreement on the multi-annual financial framework. These are the two big issues that the Germans need to resolve, and they need to do it quickly because already in Italy and Spain, people get nervous that the money doesn't come in time also to counter a possible financial crisis that might be looming.
And why do you think she's switching sides? Because she clearly has. She's gone from being on the rooted him to now joining Macron, saying it's okay to take on more debt. Why is she changing sides now?
Yeah, because this is a real existential threat, and she is afraid that the EU might fall apart if she doesn't. And also, she needed to do something because of the single market. I mean, the other countries have noted very well that Germany's kind of national efforts to help German companies make 50% of the total state aid that is approved by governments across the EU. So Germany basically is beefing up its companies and taking advantage of the suspension of state aid rules due to the comfortable fiscal margin, which other countries don't have. So Germany needed to do something to counterbalance that.
What do you think about, let me just quickly get into U.S. intervention here. Nord Stream 2, the U.S. has pushed hard against it. It's, at least from one angle, understandable, right? Because you don't want Berlin funneling money to Moscow while they're annexing Crimea. Is it going to go through?
Well, the question, I mean, I'm very much against this whole Nord Stream project from the very beginning, but the problem is that the more the Trump administration takes an issue, the stronger the opposition in Germany will become. I think that kind of the American approach towards this issue, even though there might be kind of a good reason to do this, is not helpful for everybody in Germany who makes the case against Nord Stream 2.
And I'm wondering, just to go back to Angela Merkel, there is speculation, and of course she said it many times, she's not going to run another term, that this is it for her political career. Where do you see her going next? Do you actually rule out that she's not running again?
I will rule out that she will run again. I think she has said that very clearly, and we also need to take into account that the current boom kind of in the polls, the 40% that we see for the Conservatives, is largely due to Merkel. But we have seen before the crisis that kind of people got the impression that she was tired, that she was no longer up to the job, and that can come back easily once kind of we are over this crisis. So I think the CDU is very conscious that they need new faces, new personnel, and also new ideas.
It does look like, I mean, they've gotten a big boost here, but that's largely due to Merkel. And to me, Olaf Scholz also looks great through this crisis. Of course, the SPD as a party isn't very popular right now. Who's the next chancellor?
I think this is too early to tell. We don't even know who's the next party leader for the CDU-CSU, and this is very interesting because the whole race got completely kind of turned on top because we had a clear candidate, Armin Laschet, who had the support of a majority of the CDU-CSU, and he was supposed to be the winner of all of this. But he's also head of the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia, doing incredibly bad in his crisis management. So kind of the number one option is, I think, no longer the clear winner of this, and we don't have a number two. Jens Spahn, our health minister, is also doing great, but he aligned himself closely with Armin Laschet, and now the question is whether he will dump him and kind of change camps and run on his own, or whether he will stay in Laschet's camp. So I think it's very interesting to watch in the next couple of weeks and months.
And as Germany takes over the EU presidency, do you see them paying more into the military? Do you see them increasing any contribution into NATO? Is that going to be a theme? And then I'm always curious, who is going to be the first European leader to say we need a European army that we pay for?
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
If you want to find out what the best laptop is for all those video conferences with your colleagues while sitting at your makeshift desk, you could ask a machine, or someone called Mac, or Kai, or Rachel, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hi, you're talking to Ali on Shop Live.
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Start the conversation now with Shop Live.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor gatherings, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Participate in events like these infrequently. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Edwards with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. European equities up by 0.3% then this morning. The CAC 40's a bit of an underperformer, down 0.2%, and the DAX outperforms up around 0.7. But broadly speaking, we're gaining a little momentum as we go through this session. US futures still point negative, down by between 1 and 0.2% really for the major indexes. The Asian session was actually fairly flat overnight. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the geopolitics between China and the United States. There's also plenty of news flow surrounding the virus, of course, and the ongoing battle against that in the US. That captures investors' attention, of course, but also the flare-ups that we see in Europe and in parts of Asia also. Let's check some other assets for you. We've got the oil price is on the move, up by around 2.9% for Brent prices and also WTI. We see money coming out of bond markets and therefore bond yields going a little higher. The yield on the US 10-year currently stands at 0.677. Not a great deal of movement in FX markets outside the yen. There does seem to be some movement into the yen, though. The yen currently up around 0.4% against the US dollar. It's also proving to be pretty strong against the euro and against the pound. Elsewhere, we're fairly flat to negative on the dollar this hour. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Caroline Hepker with more on what's going on around the world.
Anna, thank you. Hong Kong police say that they have made their first 2 arrests under the new security law that gives Beijing broad powers to rein in sources of opposition. It comes less than 24 hours after Chinese lawmakers handed it down. Police say they've arrested a man holding a Hong Kong independence. It comes less than 24 hours after Chinese lawmakers handed it down. Police say they've arrested a man holding a Hong Kong independence flag and later a woman with a sign reading Hong Kong independence. Critics say the law will seriously undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. The United States is going in the wrong direction when it comes to coronavirus. That's the warning of infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci. He says that daily case counts could more than double to 100,000 if people's behaviours don't change. Fauci added, clearly we are not in total control right now. He declined to estimate a number of potential virus deaths, but said that the total would be, quote, very disturbing. And here in the UK, children in Leicester will be heading to school for the last time for at least another 2 weeks today. The city's been put into a localised lockdown, meaning that classrooms will have to shut tomorrow. The decision to extend measures like closing non-essential shops was taken following a spike in coronavirus cases in the city. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg. Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Caroline, thanks very much. Now let's get over to the U.S., where they had a pretty good quarter in stocks. Yeah. Nathan, I mean, my mom, I will get a little personal here.
Okay.
Back at the beginning of March, was on the phone with me every day in tears. Like, I'm not going to be able to retire. I'm going to have to move in with you. How can I get citizenship in Germany, etc. Little old professor out of Ohio. Now she can breathe a sigh of relief. She's only down 4%.
Well, I mean, roller coaster ride doesn't really quite capture what we've been through so far in 2020, does it?
No, it's been insane. I mean, imagine if you called that right. Anyway, we were down so hard. Then I think the S&P was up 20%. The NASDAQ was up 31%. Today's the first day of Q3.
Right.
What have you got coming up?
Well, we're wondering where things go from here. We're seeing just a little bit of trepidation, perhaps, as we dip our toes into the third quarter. You just heard that warning from Dr. Fauci about the continuing effects of the coronavirus. States are starting to dial back a little bit on reopenings. What does it mean for this roller coaster ride we've been on so far? We're going to have Ben Laidler of Tower Hudson Research with us this morning. We're also going to talk with Andy Pekos of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. We're going to get his take on how we get ahead of this pandemic that in many ways, particularly in the health aspects of it, it seems like the U.S. has been a step or two behind throughout. We're also going to have the latest on the new national security law in Hong Kong. It has just gone into effect and already led to a couple of arrests. Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin will join us for a live update. All coming up with me and Karen Moscow as we get the second half started on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
I'm just looking at the WEI screen, and I want to point out something. I tell Anna this all the time lately, or at least I say it on emo. But the U.S. is doing so much better than Europe on a year-to-date measurement. If you look at the S&P 500, it's only down 4%. If you look at the NASDAQ, it's up 12% year-to-date. Mm-hmm. But if you look at what's happening here in Europe, the FTSE 100 is still down 18% and change year to date. If I look up the stock 600, which is the broader European equity index, it's down 14% year to date. So we have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, a lot of divergence in terms of the rally. Yeah, that's been a big part of the story. We'll get Ben Laidler's take on that as well.
All right, Nathan coming up with Karen. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're listening on London DAB, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
And we were just talking to Kurt Custard from Newton Investment Management, where we met, and one of his points is that there's just too much old economy in Europe versus new economy, and that plays to the point that you're making about how a lot of the outperformance in the US is because of the tech sector, and that's where a lot of the money has wanted to go to. Let's get to another guest this morning. David Riley joins us. Factories across the euro area saw a stronger performance than initially reported in June, talking of old economy, with the PMI hitting a 4-month high of 47.4. So things may be moving in the right direction, but still expansion out of sight. Let's talk to David Riley, Chief Investment Strategy at Blue Bay Asset Management. David, I wonder how much the PMI data, this kind of data, works for you right now? Because the purchasing managers that are surveyed to get this stuff, they've been through the pandemic just like everybody else, and I wonder how much 2020 vision they have of the future. How do you treat the data that we're getting at the moment?
I treat the PMI data with more care than usual, I would say, because I think the evidence is that the PMIs are a less good guide through big shocks to the economy and to sentiment. One could argue that actually the PMI should be much higher if it really was an indication of a month-on-month change in terms of level of orders and sales. And the fact that they're not, I think, sort of reflects that in practice they're really suggesting what is the level of output against expectations and sentiment level. I think what is undoubted is that after the mandated shutdowns and the subsequent easing in those restrictions, that we are having a bounce. But I wouldn't read then too much into specific PMI levels at this stage, to be frank.
What do you think about? Yesterday we weren't getting too excited ahead of Boris Johnson's New Deal speech because we knew that the numbers were going to be small, really relatively tiny, £5 billion, and that was already in the budget. But is there any place where you get excited about more stimulus to come? Because it would be great for investors especially to see a New Deal announcement, a real, like 500 billion or 1 trillion.
Okay, I closed my position on British pound with £2,000 profit at 123.94.
The outlook in terms of fiscal policy, I think fiscal policy is going to have to do much more of the heavy lifting in terms of supporting the broader recovery and ensuring that it's sustainable. And when I look at on the outlook on the fiscal side, I mean, what has made me excited in your words has been the EU Recovery Fund proposal. Not only because of its relatively large size, but because I do think that if it is passed with a substantial grant element to it, that it will be the first pan-European fiscal policy response that is meaningful and is a step towards fiscal union, which I think enhances the credibility of the Euro project. When I look to the US, which has done, I think Washington's done a good job in terms of responding to this crisis from a fiscal perspective, but a lot of that support is coming to an end. And so what worries me a little bit is whether Congress and the administration will reach an agreement to provide what is required, and that is another fiscal package.
David, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. David Riley, Chief Investment Strategist at Blue Bay Investment Management. And as ever then, Matt, these markets seem torn between the latest headlines on the virus, which still seem gloomy. It would be an interesting thing for us to discover if Western democracies prove themselves able to deal with flare-ups. There's that. But then on the other side, as soon as you start worrying about that, investors mention what the Fed does and the fact they're all over these markets right now, or what governments are going to do with fiscal stimulus. So there's still a lot to talk about.
There is, and we've kind of flatlined as well. I mean, regardless of whether you look at the S&P or the Stock 600, we kicked off June, for example, on the S&P at 3103, and right now we're trading at 3101. So you saw almost all of this incredible rally happen from March 23rd to May 30th. And it's going to be interesting to see how the third quarter continues on. This is Bloomberg.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties, optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Decisions, decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Dr. Anthony Fauci warns of coronavirus infections doubling in coming weeks.
California, Colorado, and Florida join the list of states rolling back reopening plans due to the outbreak.
And in Hong Kong, authorities make the first round of arrests under China's new national security law.
The strongest plea yet from administration officials to wear masks. The tri-state area has doubled its out-of-state visitor quarantine list. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower. In sports, we'll hear from Yankees general manager Brian Cashman, and the NBA says the league could revisit its plan to resume the season.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are moving lower this morning. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 3 points. Dow futures down 36. NASDAQ futures down 10. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. CAC in Paris down 0.1%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 0.75%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3.1% or $1.20 at $40.47 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.2% or $3.70 at $18.0430 an ounce. The euro 1.1233 against the dollar. The yen 107.52. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with a dire warning from Dr. Anthony Fauci. The nation's top infectious disease expert tells Congress daily coronavirus infections could more than double in coming weeks.
We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned.
Fauci points to indoor gatherings and bars for the surge in cases and urges all Americans to wear masks.
We've got to get that message out that we are all in this together, and if we are going to contain this, we've got to contain it together.
Hospitalizations are increasing in 12 states. The latest count has daily cases up 1.9%. That's above last week's average and approaching twice the level seen just 1 month ago. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. In Florida, Miami-Dade County reporting its highest number of hospitalizations in nearly 2 months. The state has banned consumption of alcohol in bars, but Governor Ron DeSantis has no plans for additional measures.
We're not going back, closing things. I don't think that really is what's driving it. I mean, people going to business is not what's driving it. I think when you see the younger folks, I think a lot of it is more just social interactions.
And cases in Colorado have been rising since the state reopened bars. That has Governor Jared Polis reversing course and suspending indoor service.
Our country and the world has not yet figured out, in a pandemic, how to do bars and nightclubs safely. We just haven't.
Well, so far, Goldman Sachs estimates more than 40% of the country has reversed or halted economic reopenings. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. In California, the state is reporting a record number of hospitalizations and the second biggest daily jump in cases. Here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Governor Gavin Newsom says people have just rushed out and ignored separation and mask mandates. He says he's being forced to start enforcing mask guidance.
The framework for us is this. If you're not going to stay home and you're not going to wear masks in public, we have to enforce. And we will, and we'll be making announcements on enforcement.
He says he is also very worried about behavior over the 4th of July weekend. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. As infections surge in several states, the European Union is extending its travel ban for U.S. residents. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has more from Brussels.
What the Europeans are saying is that this is really about not importing cases into the European Union, and at this point, the U.S. does not meet the criteria. The caveat here, of course, is that if you're a European citizen living anywhere, you can come back at any time, of course, because you're a European citizen, and the list will be updated every 2 weeks, which means that what's set in stone now may not apply by July 15th.
The EU is loosening travel rules for Australia, Canada, and Japan, but says the U.S. response to the pandemic is insufficient to allow Americans into the bloc.
Meantime, on Capitol Hill, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is voicing concern about the surge in cases.
Hypothetically, a second outbreak could force governments and force people to withdraw again from economic activity. And I think the worst part of it would be to undermine public confidence, which is what we need to get back to lots of kinds of economic activity that involve crowds.
Powell notes the economic recovery is moving faster than expected, but it's also presenting new challenges, most notably the need to keep the virus in check.
All right, switching gears now, we go halfway around the world where authorities in Hong Kong have made their first arrests under China's new controversial national security law. Here with the very latest is Bloomberg's Karen Lee in Hong Kong.
Less than 24 hours after the law was officially enacted on the city by China, they arrested a man holding a Hong Kong independence flag, and he was one of a few dozen protesters out in the Central Causeway Bay district. They were met by a phalanx of riot police holding new purple warning flags that say they might be in violation of the law.
And let's go right to that Central Causeway Bay district where we find Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin. She brings us the very latest now from the streets of Hong Kong.
Now, it has been largely peaceful with few bouts of commotion as the police has taken measures to disperse crowds and prevent big groups from forming. They're using tactics like setting up cordons and barricades to limit the smooth movement of people. 30 people have been arrested for offenses including illegal assembly, violation of the security law, obstructing police officers, and possessing weapons. 10 members of the pro-democracy People Power Party were among those arrested, and we have protest slogans being chanted as people are marching on the street here on July 1st, the anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong to China.
The new national security law carries a potential life sentence for those convicted, and it applies to actions committed by anyone, whether they're Hong Kong residents or not. We'll have more on unrest in the city coming up throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P futures down 2 points, Dow futures down 22. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. At 5:07 on Wall Street, we bring in Amy Morris for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan. As coronavirus cases surge nationwide, new appeals from the administration for everyone to wear masks. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams.
If you all will commit to wearing these face coverings and taking basic public health precautions, as the nation's doctor, as America's doctor, I want you to know I have every confidence that we can very quickly see these new case counts go down.
And closer to home, health officials in New York are investigating a potential coronavirus pocket at a small church in an upstate community. Governor Andrew Cuomo says one person who contracted that virus in Florida attended a service at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Ticonderoga on June 21st. The state is providing testing for anyone who attended that service. Meanwhile, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have expanded their quarantine lists to include 16 states. This as Governor Cuomo says the capital region is cleared to begin phase 4 of reopening starting today. That includes low-risk outdoor and indoor arts and entertainment, media production, and higher education services. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio's office says the city is on pace to reopen 15 of the city's 53 public outdoor swimming pools on August 1st. And in Connecticut, the coronavirus rate has reached an all-time low. Governor Ned Lamont says only 152 tests came back positive between Sunday and Monday, the lowest numbers they've seen so far. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and the City Council, meanwhile, have agreed to an $88.1 billion budget on the final day of the city's fiscal year. That includes cutting police spending by $1 billion. And in New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy signed a $7.62 million stopgap spending bill for a fifth quarter for the current fiscal year. That'll help the state navigate a projected $10 billion shortfall. The plan cut about $2 billion in spending that was planned before the pandemic. And President Trump says he will veto the entire defense spending bill if it contains a provision that would remove names of Confederate officers from bases. The Warren Amendment was included in the measure that was approved by the Republican-led Senate Armed Services Committee. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, thanks, Amy. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashar.
All right, good morning, Nathan. With the virus spiking, is NBA Commissioner Adam Silver having second thoughts about resuming the season? We're just a week away from 22 teams reporting to Orlando and a hotspot state, but Silver said it's never been full speed ahead, that they could revisit their plans, and that if they get a lot of cases, they'll stop playing. The NHL might have the right idea. Go to Canada. There are reports the league is considering having its playoff games in Toronto and Edmonton. Baseball players start showing up today before the workouts come the tests for COVID. Actual workouts likely to start Friday. Yankees general manager Brian Cashman hopeful that players having gone so long without playing that doesn't lead to injuries.
Boone and our staff are going to try to, get as close as they possibly can to stimulate some game actions over the course of this 3-week period, and that's going to, put a stress on all aspects of the body. It's obviously designed to get them ready, but it also exposed those who might not be ready.
Cashman on the Yes Network also updated Yankee injuries. He said he's hopeful Aaron Judge's rib allows him to play the opener, that Aaron Hicks is a possibility back from Tommy John surgery, that James Paxton has resolved his bad back, and Giancarlo Stanton, who hurt his calf, may stick to being a DH. And what was not a well-kept secret, minor league baseball has been canceled, although most of the players will get paid. Hundreds who make a living working for minor league teams will not. There's a push by those who have won MVP awards to stop using the name Kennesaw Mountain Landis in connection with the award. He was the longtime commissioner who many say was not a proponent of letting black players into the game, and yet his name and face is on the MVP award. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. In other sports news, the Mets are cutting staff off the field. The New York Post is reporting the club laid off 25 employees last week. Most worked in business operations. The paper also says the Mets have instituted pay cuts for their entire staff. Getting ready for the kickoff of the second half of 2020. Futures are little changed to lower right now. S&P futures down 0.5 point. Dow futures down 9. NASDAQ futures lower by 4 points. We're going to check in next with Ben Laidler, CEO of Tower Hudson Research, for his outlook on the second half. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
For the Jewish Communal Fund.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road, or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
Here's Yvonne Mann.
Joining us is Professor Richard Wong, a professor of economics at the University of Hong Kong. You see this wealth gap, quite remarkable, when you have the highest concentration of billionaires here in the city, and then on the other side you have 1 in 5 people that still live below the poverty line. What do you think is the source of this disparity?
I think a number. First, technological change in the world over. Globalization has resulted in a stagnant middle income class for 3 decades or more, creating a rising gap. And this is particularly accelerated in Hong Kong because of mainland China's opening up that has generated a hyper-acceleration of this process in Hong Kong over the past 3 decades.
You mentioned it exacerbated the inequality issues. Do you see that changing in any way?
Well, I don't think it will stop, but because in part the mainland's influence is not just money coming in the past 40 years. There have been huge influxes of low-scale new immigrants that through cross-border marriages between mainland and Chinese and Hong Kong Chinese residents. As a result, that gap has also widened in terms of human capital distribution.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures, little change to lower. European stocks edging higher in a muted start to third quarter trading as investors mull mixed economic data and fresh warnings about the spread of the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down a point. Dow futures down 14. NASDAQ futures down 4. The DAX in Germany's up about 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 7/32. Yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3.1%, up $1.23 at $40.49 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.25% or $4.10 at $18.0460 an ounce. The euro 1.1225 against the dollar, British pound 1.2395, and the yen 107.52. Today we are looking for a report on private payrolls by the ADP Research Institute at 8:15 Wall Street time. At 10, we get a look at manufacturing and construction spending, and then the Federal Reserve releases minutes from its June meeting at 2. General Mills and Constellation Brands among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Lawmakers got an earful yesterday about where the coronavirus may be headed in the U.S. Details now from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
Well, Amy, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, tells Congress new cases of COVID-19 could more than double to 100,000 a day. Meantime, Miami-Dade County in Florida is reporting its highest number of hospitalizations in nearly 2 months. Republican Governor Ron DeSantis again ruled out new restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. In California, the state is reporting a record number of hospitalizations and the second biggest daily jump in cases. Economic reopenings have been stopped or reversed in 40% of the country. That's according to Goldman Sachs. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thank you, John. And in other news, the Trump administration is arranging a closed-door briefing today with intelligence officials for the so-called Gang of Eight House and Senate leaders regarding those reports that Russian operatives in Afghanistan offered bounties to kill American troops. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Amy, thank you. It's coming up to 5:20 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and as we get ready for the kickoff of the second half of 2020, we're joined live by Ben Laidler, CEO of Tower Hudson Research. Really good to talk with you this morning, Ben. Of course, we had the crash in the first quarter. Now we're coming off the best second quarter for stocks in more than 20 years. What's the outlook for Q3?
I think you're going to see, basically, I hope you're going to see a consolidation, but I do think the risk remains, very firmly on the upside. I think earnings are sort of bottomed. We've got to get through this upcoming Q2 earnings season, which is going to be the trough. And I do see sort of valuations slowly growing into this bottoming of earnings. But again, I do think the risk is to the upside here. I think Q2 earnings are going to be the bottom. I think you're going to get more fiscal stimulus. I think this economic rebound is going to continue to be very resilient to this sort of scare that we're having right now on virus cases, and investor sentiment remains very negative. So I think the risk is we just we grind higher.
All right. Well, we do have those warnings, of course, from Dr. Fauci, and we are starting to see a number of states dial back or at least pause their reopenings. What kind of potential headwind could that pose?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that needs to slow down at some point. But I think the data so far is showing you actually that this economic recovery has been very, very resilient to that. The sort of high-frequency data. I mean, we have our high-frequency activity data we looked at last week. It improved 5% despite this sort of big spike in cases. So, I hope that can continue. Obviously, at this point, we've got maybe a third of U.S. economic activity, at least. Or at least restrictions sort of been slowing rather than stalling. So you would like to see that sort of top out at some point. But again, I think the message so far is how resilient the recovery has been to this spike in cases. The big question is how far that can go. But again, the activity is still very depressed. So I do think the risk remains on the upside. And if we do get this sort of spike under control, then I think that incremental data point is going to continue to be very positive. And again, aside from that, I do think the backdrop remains very supportive.
You say we've hit the trough in terms of earnings. When do you see earnings expectations catching up with valuations?
I think you're beginning to see it. So downgrades have stopped. Over the last month or so. Q2, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, is clearly the big test. Earnings are going to fall something like 45%. That's like 3 times more than we came through in the first quarter. But I think that's the trough. Then you've got a big sort of 30% earnings rebound forecast for next year. And I think if we begin to see that sort of get validated by this continued incremental recovery over the next over the next weeks and months. And I think valuations stop looking expensive. I mean, you're on less than 20 times earnings for next year, which is not too far away from your sort of 5-6 year average. And with bond yields, well under 1%, I would make the case that, if you get that sort of earnings rebound, valuations are really quite undemanding.
So does that have you thinking that a rotation to value stocks happens a little bit sooner than what a lot of people might be thinking right now?
Yes, I mean, within reason. I mean, we're running a pretty balanced portfolio. I mean, there's clearly a lot of uncertainty out there. We still like a lot of these sort of long duration quality growth sectors like tech and healthcare. I think they can continue to do well in this environment. But absolutely, I would be adding sort of selectively to, we've been adding to small cap, real estate, some energy names. Definitely be very selective on the value side, though. I mean, we still don't like financials, for example, which I think has some very specific headwinds from bond yields and sort of capital distribution. I mean, that's your biggest sort of value sector. But outside of financials, we've absolutely been adding to value. I definitely think it does well as we sort of come through this GDP and earnings inflection point, which I think we're going to see in the next in the next few weeks.
All right, thanks for this. As always, good talking with you, Ben. That is Ben Laidler. He is the CEO of Tower Hudson Research. And as we get ready to head into the second half, little change on the futures contracts at the moment. S&P futures little changed right now. Dow futures are down by 3 points. NASDAQ futures lower by a 0.5 point. Stock 600 higher by 0.5% in Europe. The 10-year Treasury is down 6/30 seconds. The yield 0.67% on the 10-year note. 2-year yield 0.15%. West Texas Intermediate is higher by 3.25%. $40.55 a barrel. The euro at 1.1226 against the dollar, and the yen 107.53. Stay with us. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street turns to a new quarter amid investor concern over rising coronavirus cases that threaten to stall the economic recovery. Stocks surged in the second quarter overall. The S&P 500 rose 20%, the best quarter since 1998. The Senate has passed an extension of the popular Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, which shut down last night with more than $130 billion left over. The House has yet to take up the bill. FedEx reported financial results that beat analyst estimates in the latest quarter, underscoring efforts to shore up profit margins amid pressure from soaring residential deliveries, which are typically less profitable than commercial shipments. But a surge in health equipment deliveries also helped FedEx. And for the first time in its history, minor league baseball has canceled its season because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The games depend on fan attendance to bring in revenue and don't have the lucrative TV deals enjoyed by Major League Baseball. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternatives?
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location.
To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
When your tenants have an overflowing block sink and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super drainage engineer in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and electricians. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Normally, I'd be recording this in a fancy sound studio with a mocha-frocka skinny latte. Instead, I'm in my bathroom. Technology means I can wander around my house reading this script, and people can take a wander around yours with Purple Brick's virtual viewings, or they can safely view it in person if you prefer.
Do you want a cup of tea, love?
Can I get a mocha-frocka skinny latte?
Beg your pardon?
Tea's fine, thank you. Book your free valuation with Purple Bricks.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are little change to higher now to kick off the third quarter as investors watch coronavirus cases surge in several states. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the very latest. John, good morning.
And Karen, hospitalizations are increasing in 12 states. The latest count has daily cases up 1.9%. That's above last week's average and approaching twice the level seen just 1 month ago. If things don't change, Dr. Anthony Fauci says infections could more than double in coming weeks.
I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned.
California is reporting a record number of hospitalizations and its second biggest daily jump in cases. Miami-Dade County in Florida reporting its highest hospitalizations in nearly 2 months. That has both states rolling back reopening plans. So far, Goldman Sachs estimates that more than 40% of the country has reversed or halted economic reopenings. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. And as infections surge in several states, the European Union is extending its travel ban for U.S. residents. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has more from Brussels.
This is really about not importing cases into the European Union, and at this point, the U.S. does not meet the criteria. The caveat here, of course, is that the list will be updated every 2 weeks, which means that what's set in stone now may not apply by July 15th.
The EU says the U.S. response to the pandemic is insufficient to allow Americans into the bloc for non-essential reasons.
Meantime, in Hong Kong, China's new national security law has taken effect, and Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis brings us the very latest.
The new law carries a potential life sentence for those convicted. It extends to actions by anyone, whether or not they are Hong Kong residents, and it would ensnare even people committing nonviolent actions. Opposition lawmakers say it will cast a chilling effect over civil liberties. and top activists resigned from their parties. Some of those parties disbanded. Yet, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam scoffed at the criticism. What country in the world, she said, doesn't have its own security legislation? In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Brian. Already, authorities in Hong Kong have made their first arrests under the national security law. Bloomberg's Karen Lee has more from the city.
They arrested a man holding a Hong Kong independence flag, and he was one of a few dozen protesters out in the Central Causeway Bay district. They were met by a phalanx of riot police holding new purple warning flags that say they might be in violation of the law.
And we will bring you a live update from those protests in the Central Causeway Bay district coming up in 15 minutes right here on Bloomberg Daybreak. And it's now 5:33 on Wall Street. For more on the latest world and national news, we bring in Bloomberg's Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan. It is the strongest appeal yet from the administration for the public to wear masks. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams asking the public to, quote, please, please, please wear a mask. Vice President Mike Pence asking people to follow guidelines.
Wash your hands. Practice good hygiene. And wear a mask. Wear a mask whenever your state and local authorities say it's appropriate. So it's always a good idea to wear a mask when social distancing is not possible.
Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar also appealing to the public to wear masks. New York State health officials investigating a potential coronavirus hotspot at a church in upstate New York. Someone who contracted the virus in Florida attended services at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Ticonderoga on June 21st. Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state will provide testing for anyone who attended that service. This as 16 states are now on the quarantine list for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Visitors would have to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival. But the numbers are going down in New York, so Governor Cuomo says the capital region is cleared to begin Phase 4 of reopening starting today, including low-risk outdoor and indoor arts and entertainment, media production, and higher education services. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and the City Council have agreed to an $88.1 billion budget on the final day of the city's fiscal year, and that includes cutting police spending by $1 billion. This, as the mayor's office says, the city is also on pace to reopen 15 of the city's 53 public outdoor swimming pools on August 1st. Connecticut's coronavirus rate has reached an all-time low. Governor Ned Lamont says only 152 tests came back positive between Sunday and Monday, the lowest numbers they've seen so far. Still, the governor says residents need to keep their guards up and not take those numbers for granted. And in a tweet just before midnight, President Trump threatened to veto the entire defense spending bill if it contains a provision that would remove names of Confederate officers from military bases. The Warren Amendment was included in the measure that was approved by the Republican-led Senate Armed Services Committee. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Amy, thanks. It's 5:35 on Wall Street and time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashar.
All right, Nathan, July 1st, the date for the restart of spring training. Until recently, the Mets and Yankees thought they'd be going to Florida. Instead, they're in New York, and the first order of business today, everyone gets tested. Yankees general manager Brian Cashman said on the Yes Network, the team has so far been lucky.
We've experienced, like I think every walk of life, positive COVID tests. But thankfully, from that, we really only had, and it was back in spring training, we really only had one employee, for instance, one employee that really was struggling for a good 10 days with it and needed some hospitalization. That was back in March.
The first actual workout will be Friday or Saturday. The NHL has still not announced where its playoff games will be held. 5 cities vying for 2 spots with so many virus cases in the U.S. Some say the NHL will stick with Toronto and Edmonton. The NBA, we know, is headed to Orlando next week, but Commissioner Adam Silver admits if there are too many cases, they'll stop playing. 3 New Orleans Pelicans players just tested positive. The Denver Nuggets closed their facility. A lot of local and national broadcasters in all sports will be doing games from a studio rather than the site, but the NBA says its announcers will be at the games, and that has caused 79-year-old Marv Albert to not take part. He's been doing NBA games since 1963. The NBA also says the games will be on a delay so they can edit out players and coaches using bad language. Cam Newton's going to New England. Could Odell Beckham be following? The two have been working out together. Beckham's 2019 season in Cleveland did not go well, but the former Giant says he wants to stay with the Browns. And the Pats got Newton on the cheap. Beckham makes $18 million a year. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
Thank you, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Joan Doniger. Good morning, Joan.
Nathan, New York City hotels need to fill empty rooms during the pandemic, so some are offering rooms as temporary office space. One in Soho, another a few blocks away from Grand Central are pitching themselves as potential office spaces. The Roger Smith Hotel says there is interest from companies that are downsizing. New Jersey Governor Murphy signed a $7.6 billion stopgap spending bill for the current fiscal year to cope with a more than $10 billion shortfall in revenue. However, the plan cuts nearly $2 billion in spending that was planned before the coronavirus outbreak, and it extends the fiscal year through September while cutting the next one short by 3 months. New Jersey restaurant owners are furious with the governor. They were supposed to open for indoor dining today. Governor Murphy put that on pause. Restaurants, though, have already received deliveries of fresh food that now they probably won't be able to use as they go back just to takeout and outdoor dining. With the Tri-State Business Report, I'm Joan Doniger. Nathan?
All right, Joan, thanks. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WCCO in Minneapolis, we're watching for earnings from General Mills.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WTVN in Columbus, I'm reporting the Ohio Attorney General says General Motors should repay $60 million in state tax credits.
I'm Caroline Hepcombe, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on a new warning from British business leaders about the economic damage if the UK fails to get a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. American Airlines plan to fill planes, draws rebuke from the CDC.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. We're also watching shares of FedEx in the pre-market. They are up almost 10.5%, with the company reporting better than estimated earnings after launching an efficiency drive aimed at home deliveries. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
FedEx declined to provide a financial forecast amid the economic uncertainty from the pandemic, but CEO Fred Smith sounded an upbeat note saying, quote, as a result of these strategic investments we've made to enhance our capabilities and efficiencies, FedEx is well positioned to support and benefit from the reopening of the global economy. FedEx Express picked up volume from the government and companies airlifting personal protective equipment and other essential goods to combat the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. And shares of Beyond Meat are up almost 10% in the pre-market. For the first time ever, the fake meat producer will begin selling plant-based burgers in China supermarkets this weekend. In the U.S., sales of plant-based meat products soared 264% in the first months of the lockdown. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now with the cover on the King and the CEO. How LeBron James and business partner Maverick Carter are expanding their media empire at perhaps just the right moment. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. And listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determined
determining that I was going to do it. But I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelized crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chili, black pepper and sugar. And sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered, the newest podcast series from the storytellers at NBC Sports that will shine a fresh light on the most unforgettable moments in sport.
The reason why I'm smiling, I might get in trouble for this.
Search Sports Uncovered to start listening today.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Hilton Knowles on the unrest that followed a police killing in his Brooklyn neighborhood more than 50 years ago.
Standing by my mother's living room window, I tried tentatively to ask her why our world was burning. She gave me a forbidding look. Boy, be quiet so you can survive, her eyes seemed to say.
Hilton Knowles on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
The TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Confirmed coronavirus cases keep climbing.
The number of known COVID-19 cases in the U.S. doubles every month, according to Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Clearly, we are not in total control right now. We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around.
At least 19 states have halted or rolled back reopen plans just ahead of the 4th of July weekend. I'm John Lawrence.
Hong Kong police, under a controversial new national security law imposed by China's central government, made some 70 arrests Wednesday, the anniversary of the former British colony's handover to Chinese rule. Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein reportedly reaches a nearly $19 million settlement with dozens of sexual misconduct accusers. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures now moving lower, and European stocks are little changed. And a muted start to third quarter trading as investors mull mixed economic data and fresh warnings about the spread of the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 11 points. Dow futures down 107. NASDAQ futures down 30. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 2.7% or $1.09 to $40.36 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $5.40 at $18.05.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1220 against the dollar. British pound 1.2395. And the yen 107.51. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, health experts painting a grim picture for lawmakers about the future of the coronavirus in the U.S. Bloomberg's John Tucker joining us now live with details. John.
And Amy, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, tells Congress new cases of COVID-19 could more than double to 100,000 a day. Miami-Dade County in Florida is reporting its highest number of hospitalizations in nearly 2 months. Republican Governor Ron DeSantis again ruled out new restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. In California, that state is reporting a record number of hospitalizations and the second biggest daily jump in cases. Meantime, economic reopenings have been stopped or reversed in 40% of the country, according to Goldman Sachs. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. In other news, almost 90% of Americans say they're dissatisfied with the state of the country. A new Pew Research Center study shows voters' unhappiness will be reflected in their political decisions going into the presidential election. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Amy, thank you. It is now 5:49 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Now let's get the latest from Hong Kong, a city marking now 23 years today since the end of British rule, with a new national security law from China that could put its autonomy at risk. Already, that law has led to at least 2 arrests, according to police. For the latest, we're joined live from Hong Kong by Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin. Good to have you with us this morning, Sophie. What do we know about these arrests so far?
Of the arrests that have been made, 2 have been linked to the new security bill. The individuals, they were holding posters and flags that displayed the saying Hong Kong independence. So that puts them under the scrutiny of this new bill. Police have also made other arrests related to other offenses, such as illegal assembly. So far on their Twitter, the latest update is more than 70 arrests haven't been made. And given the activity we've seen throughout parts of the city, there's heavy police presence, and there are people on the streets who are not wearing the usual all-black garb that we've come to see for Hong Kong protesters here. They look like they're enjoying their public holiday. People are out shopping, going to restaurants, but they are milling on the streets, trying to find some kind of solidarity, if you will. But the police have managed to put up cordons in strategic areas around the city to dispel crowds from gathering. But still, people are out and about, and it is largely peaceful here in Hong Kong.
And as I watch headlines across the Bloomberg as we speak, Sophie, Hong Kong police are now saying 7 people have been arrested under the security law and more than 180 in all in today's protest. So it doesn't seem as though this new national security law is quelling the demonstrations, at least not at this point.
For those who have been arrested, what we have seen and observed through footage or observing a few streets away, people are impassioned when it comes to their positions and feelings on the national security bill that was passed not even 24 hours ago. There is a lot of uncertainty as to the reach of the bill, who will actually fall under its provisions. Currently, the details are that 4 offenses can be punished, namely terrorism, subversion of state power, secession, and collusion with foreign forces. And the maximum penalty for the most severe of those cases would be for life imprisonment. One of the big worries leading into this decision was whether a death penalty would be introduced. That was not the case, and retroactive application will not be applied as well. But as we've noted, we are seeing a pickup in arrests today, more than 180 being arrested just the latest update from police. So going into the evening here in Hong Kong, it's unlikely we'll see the activity die down.
It's interesting. We heard from Chinese officials calling this law a sword of Damocles for critics of the regime, and it seems like that's at least one point of agreement that both supporters and critics of this law can find here.
Yeah, backers of the bill as well as detractors contend the focus is very narrow, though it only impacts a minority, the most strident critics of the government. But there's a wide scope in terms of who could run afoul of the rules, given the extraterritorial nature of the bill, which covers Hong Kong residents and non-residents anywhere in the world. So again, there's this gray area as to whether incitement and instigation along with action will lead to arrest, prosecution, and punishment.
When you have that kind of reach for a law like this, Sophie, what is the concern in the business community in Hong Kong on the kind of effect that it could have on them?
The message could be interpreted as stay out of politics. You have seen the likes of HSBC and Centrac, for example, lend their support to the bill, implying that they want to do business here, that they will keep their noses clean in terms of staying out of the political conversation. In the wake of this bill being passed, we had similar rhetoric from the chief of Barclays and investors who Bloomberg has spoken to. They're looking at the bigger picture here when it comes to how they foresee dealing with investments and relationships here in Hong Kong. Ultimately, it is still a capital hub. Whether it will remain a global force as a financial hub, that remains in question. But many have said this bill is meant to provide stability and support for the rule of law. But here in the city, that debate is certainly still very much left open.
Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin with us from Hong Kong this morning. Sophie, thank you so much for the update. Really appreciate it. Karen?
All right, thanks, Nathan. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The Supreme Court has released 2 opinions so far since the justices made history in May by hearing arguments by phone. The decisions came twice as fast as usual. Smile Direct Club is suing Delta Dental, charging the insurance company with fraud for denying coverage for web-based teeth straightening treatments. Smile Direct Club says the pandemic has made teledentistry more important than ever. A United Nations body eased a greenhouse gas reduction plan at the urging of the airline industry, which said the pandemic is an obstacle to achieving the plan's targets.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. The Supreme Court has ruled the president has the power to fire the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but stopped well short of abolishing the agency. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion in the 5-4 decision. For more on the ruling, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Jill Fish, a business law professor at the University of Pennsylvania Law School.
This decision seemed to give some and take away some. It ruled that the CFPB is constitutional, but that its director can be fired without cause by the president.
It's clearly a compromise, and you see that not so much in the majority opinion, but in the stridency of both Justice Thomas and Justice Kagan's opinions. They, I think, highlight how extreme a position the court could have taken in either direction and chose not to.
Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion. What was his reasoning for coming to this decision?
So I think there's components to this. I think first and most importantly, the future of the modern administrative state. The breadth of the court's reasoning could potentially affect the legitimacy, not just of the CFPB, but a range of independent agencies, the FTC, the Federal Communications Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the CFTC. So the court had to be careful not to undermine the workings of those agencies. Second component, the court, I think, was very concerned not to disrupt completely protection of consumers and consumer finance regulation. A broadly written decision that struck down the CFPB entirely would have left consumer protection in a range of areas completely undesignated, right? Other agencies don't have the manpower, don't have the bandwidth, and in some cases don't have the statutory authority to pick up the slack.
And that's University of Pennsylvania law professor Jill Fish speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures are lower, down 8 points. Dow futures down 88. NASDAQ futures down 23. The 10-year Treasury is down 8/32, yield 0.68%. And the yield on the 2 years at 0.15%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. Coming up this hour,
Dr. Anthony Fauci warns of coronavirus infections doubling in coming weeks.
California, Colorado, and Florida join the list of states rolling back reopening plans due to the outbreak.
And in Hong Kong, authorities make the first round of arrests under China's new national security law.
The strongest plea yet from administration officials to wear masks. The tri-state area has doubled its out-of-state visitor quarantine list. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. We'll hear from Yankees general manager Brian Cashman, and the NBA says the league could revisit its plan to resume the season.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by Interactive Brokers Mutual Fund Marketplace. Clients from over 200 countries and territories have access to over 21,000 no-load and 8,300 no-transaction fee funds. Learn more at ibkr.com/funds.
And U.S. futures are lower this morning to kick off the first day of the third quarter. It is 6:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 10 points. Dow futures down 109. NASDAQ futures down 29. The DAX in Germany is down 0.4%. CAC in Paris down 0.9%. And the FTSE 100 down 0.8%. 10-year Treasury down 8/32, yield 0.68%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 2.7%. 1% up $1.06 at $40.33 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.2% or $4 to $18.0450 an ounce. The euro 1.1206 against the dollar. The yen 107.54. Nathan.
Well, Karen, we begin with a dire warning from Dr. Anthony Fauci. The nation's top infectious disease expert tells Congress daily coronavirus infections could more than double in coming weeks.
We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned.
Fauci points to indoor gatherings and bars for the surge in cases and urges all Americans to wear masks.
We've got to get that message out that we are all in this together, and if we are going to contain this, we've got to contain it together.
Hospitalizations are increasing in 12 states, and the latest count has daily cases up 1.9%. That is above last week's average and approaching twice the level seen just 1 month ago. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Nathan. In Florida, Miami-Dade County is reporting its highest number of hospitalizations in nearly 2 months. The state has banned consumption of alcohol in bars, but Governor Ron DeSantis has no plans for additional measures.
We're not going back, closing things. I don't think that really is what's driving it. I mean, people going to business is not what's driving it. I think when you see the younger folks, I think a lot of it is more just social interactions.
Cases in Colorado have been rising since the state reopened bars, and that has Governor Jared Polis reversing course and suspending indoor service.
Our country and the world has not yet figured out, in a pandemic, how to do bars and nightclubs safely. We just haven't.
So far, Goldman Sachs estimates that more than 40% of the country has reversed or halted economic reopenings. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. In California, the state is reporting a record number of hospitalizations and the second biggest daily jump in cases. And here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Governor Gavin Newsom says people have just rushed out and ignored separation and mask mandates. He says he's being forced to start enforcing mask guidance.
The framework for us is this: if you're not going to stay home and you're not going to wear masks in public, we have to enforce. And we will, and we'll be making announcements on enforcement.
He says he is also very worried about behavior over the 4th of July weekend. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. As infections surge in several states, the European Union is extending its travel ban for U.S. residents. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has more from Brussels.
What the Europeans are saying is that this is really about not importing cases into the European Union, and at this point, the U.S. does not meet the criteria. The caveat here, of course, is that if you're a European citizen living anywhere, you can come back at any time, of course, because you're a European citizen, and the list will be updated every 2 weeks, which means that what's set in stone now may not apply by July 15th.
The EU is loosening travel restrictions for Australia, Canada, and Japan, but says the U.S. response to the pandemic
Sorry guys, I got to restart my computer because I received lots of data from all over the world. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes, okay? Cheers.